The silence of the hospital room is suddenly interrupted by the worried voices of doctors. Kusanagi Minato looks at his reflection in the mirror, confused, not believing his eyes. Medics hastily unpack the bandages, revealing a body untouched by scars. The old doctor, with horror in his eyes, realizes that something unimaginable is happening. Kusanagi Minato looks at his hands in bewilderment, feeling a strange lightness in every muscle. The boy reflects on the nature of his healing, attributing it to the remnants of magic. Doctors help him up as he tries to figure out where his usual strength has gone. The doctor exchanges confused glances with his assistant, trying to find the right words. A flash of alarm fills the room as Kusanagi Minato asks the most important question. The guy's gaze turns cold as he says a name that shouldn't be heard here. The doctors exchange glances, realizing the profound strangeness of the situation. The doctor says the name and the current year out loud, destroying the patient's familiar world. Tensions rise as Kusanagi Minato realizes the extent of the time jump. Doctors agree that the guys are not crazy at all, but are telling the truth. The nurse holds a strange gadget up to his face, causing the boy to freeze in surprise. Disbelief turns to panic when Kusanagi Minato realizes he has found himself far in the future. The sobering words of the doctors about the fact that the number of monsters has decreased make him hold his breath. The thought that humanity has finally found a fragile peace brings bitter relief. Kusanagi Minato's face reflects deep relief mixed with fatigue. The terrible memory of the great calamity and the true fate of Kusanagi Minato, cut short in that nightmare, flashes through his mind. Kazuki clings frantically to the elusive details of the past, trying to comprehend the incredible truth. On that fateful day, his former life ended, but death became only the threshold for a new beginning in the body of Kusanagi Minato. The gray walls of a modest apartment building greet him with an oppressive, almost tangible silence. The door chair opens with a dull thud, revealing the Spartan furnishings of the new home. Kazuki glanced around the room and sighed heavily, gradually coming to terms with the idea that this was now his personal refuge. Kusanagi Minato's personal file, full of dark secrets and bitter discoveries, ends up in his hands. Fate was merciless to the boy. His real parents died many years ago, leaving him completely alone. The adoptive parents did not want to deal with the orphan, mercilessly throwing him out and sending him to a boarding school. Leafing through the documents, Kazuki sees that since then the teenager has survived only on a meager inheritance. The guy falls onto the bed, clutching the gadget in his hand and thinking about the strangeness of his reincarnation. An anticipatory smile touches the corners of his lips. It seems this reality has many surprises in store for him. Suddenly, the silence was cut by the sharp ringing of a mobile phone, causing Kazuki to jump in surprise. He looks down at the screen, frowning in confusion at the sudden call. With one casual movement, Kazuki tosses the smartphone aside, preferring not to ruin his mood. The majestic spires of the prestigious Magic Academy rise beneath a cloudless sky, attracting hundreds of young adepts. Kazuki confidently walks along the cobbled paths of Kamui Magic Academy, trying on the role of an ordinary student for the first time. As he looks around the spacious campus, he notes to himself that returning to his desk in such an unusual place has its own charms. But these enthusiastic thoughts are immediately replaced by the cold realization of the harsh reality of this world. A flash of crimson magic illuminates the courtyard as one of the students unleashes a destructive force right in the middle of the street. Kazuki stands frozen in place, staring at the burning targets in shock, and asking himself the main question: what is going on with this world full of magic? Kazuki can't believe his eyes, frantically trying to comprehend how pathetic the level of local magic has become. Normal school life is in full swing all around him, but after what he experienced in the past, everything around him seems incredibly dull and gray. His whole being is consumed by a sticky nightmare from the realization of what a stupid situation he found himself in. The most powerful sorcerers of this era are only a pitiful shadow of the newcomers he knew before. Overwhelmed by the cruel reality, he wanders down the corridor, feeling like a complete stranger in this world. The classroom door swings open with a loud squeak, attracting everyone's attention. Kazuki steps over the threshold, automatically recording the layout of the room and the seating arrangement of the students. This atmosphere awakens long-forgotten memories, making the heart beat a little faster. The echoing silence of the classroom is suddenly cut by a loud, irritated shout. A trio of bullies, led by Kusanagi Minato, appears before him and immediately begins his usual intimidation. Kazuki, with a completely unperturbed expression, bombards the bully with questions, not even trying to hide his boredom. This blatant disregard literally makes Kusanagi Minato's blood boil. In a fit of rage, Kusanagi Minato throws his leg into the air, knocking over a desk in his path. He looms over Kazuki, drooling and accusing him of the most unforgivable sin, memory loss. Kazuki sighs tiredly, looking at the enraged guy as if he were a capricious child. A call from Raito appears on the phone screen, and Kazuki suddenly remembers his promise. Kusanagi Minato continues to drool, reminding us of the harsh laws of school friendship and gangster concepts. Kazuki suddenly breaks into a wide smile and shakes the stunned bully's hand in a friendly manner. Kusanagi Minato is immediately taken aback by this turn of events, waving his arms angrily and trying to regain control of the situation. The restless bully grabs Kazuki by the lapels, demanding that he immediately empty his pockets and hand over his parents' entire inheritance. The morning at the academy begins with the usual bustle, when suddenly the blue-haired Raito appears at the door, radiating an inexhaustible supply of cheerfulness and joy. The energetic headman immediately attracts everyone's attention, shining so brightly as if he had just stepped off the pages of a glossy magazine. His cheerful smile and the sparkle in his eyes can light up even the darkest dungeon, not to mention a school classroom. Without even realizing it, Raito displays impeccable style, causing those around him to involuntarily stare at his elegant and neat appearance. Meanwhile, the atmosphere becomes tense as Kusanagi Minato continues his comical pressure on his confused comrade. The impudent bully tries to seize the initiative, declaring that the conversation will continue very soon and under completely different conditions. However, Kazuki doesn't even think about playing along with this circus, mentally sending up prayers for peace and quiet. Meanwhile, the teacher continues his monotonous lecture, immersing the class in the dark chronicles of days gone by. The lecturer returns to events of a grand scale, when humanity almost drowned in the abyss of chaos. It was then that a mysterious hero in a black cloak appeared in the arena, whose power surpassed all laws of physics and magic. Sitting nearby, Raito listens to the story with reverence because it is about a fateful battle that changed the course of history. The teacher takes up the idea with pride, reminding the students who exactly put an end to the nightmare. But for Kazuki himself, this lesson turns into a real test of strength and endurance. The guy is ready to sink into the ground from the burning shame that has overwhelmed him, because hearing this about himself is torture worse than any monster's. Kazuki tries his best to hide his face, silently praying for this awkward scene to end soon. However, he himself prefers to observe what is happening from a distance, mentally located somewhere far beyond the stuffy classroom. Free birds fly past the window, reminding us how pleasant it is to simply abstract ourselves from the annoying world. The tiring school day finally comes to an end, and the stern teacher announces the long-awaited lights out. As soon as class is ended, Kusanagi Minato immediately returned to his favorite pastime, mocking Kazuki. But Kazuki had already gotten used to ignoring this endless noise, deciding that wasting his nerves on empty attacks was an unaffordable luxury. Kusanagi Minato continues to press the issue, trying to get Kazuki to ask questions about his origins. His caustic taunts echo throughout the class, finding a response only from equally cocky comrades. But Kazuki doesn't even turn around, demonstrating complete indifference to cheap provocations. This disdain instantly infuriates Kusanagi Minato, igniting genuine anger in his eyes. Unable to contain his anger, he leaps into the air, summoning a destructive fire element right into the classroom. Classmates retreat in horror, not believing that someone would dare to commit such madness for the sake of a school quarrel. And Kazuki continues to stand calmly with his back to the raging flames, as if what is happening does not concern him at all. A bright flash illuminates the surrounding area as Kusanagi Minato unleashes a spell on his target. A wave of fire lifts desks and chairs, forcing terrified students to cover their faces with their hands. Raito looks at the growing fire in horror, realizing the danger of the situation. In a panic, Raito tries to appeal to common sense, reminding everyone of the possible casualties. But Kusanagi Minato himself is no longer happy with his outburst, trying to shift the blame onto his imperturbable opponent. The smoke clears and the shocked spectators freeze, expecting the worst. Through the veil of smoke, Kazuki emerges with a confident gait, unharmed, adjusting his uniform. Classmates can't believe their eyes when they see such a terrible picture. Leto steps back in shock, realizing the gap in power between them. Kazuki casts a calm glance at his classmates who stood frozen around him. Kusanagi Minato and his accomplices are horrified to realize that a direct hit from a powerful spell left their opponent completely unharmed. Kazuki's icy voice sounds like a sentence, causing the bully to shudder with sudden fear. A heavy aura suppresses the will of those around him, showing that the secretive guy's patience has come to an end. The cocky student instinctively steps back, feeling the fatality of his situation. But Kazuki isn't going to let him get away with it that easily, intending to teach him a harsh lesson. The rest of the students stood frozen in stupor, watching the difficult scene with bated breath. A dense wave of magic spills out, shaking the space around with a crushing electrical discharge. A thick aura covers the corridor from head to toe, causing everyone present to feel a cold sense of dread. The confused students look around in panic, completely unable to understand what is happening. Reto clenches his fists in confusion, feeling paralyzing fear grip his body. The very source of this overwhelming power continues to walk unperturbed through the sparkling air. Those present can barely move from their place under the colossal pressure of an alien force. Kazuki ends this brief standoff with a lazy wave of his hand, regaining control of the situation. The uncontrollable hooligan sank to the floor, breathing heavily from the shock he had experienced. An enraged teacher bursts into the corridor, screaming, attracted by powerful surges of energy. Kazuki immediately takes on an innocent look, turning easily and casually towards the teacher who has arrived. He takes a breath, skillfully changing the mask on his face. Raito immediately picks up the game, lighting up everything around him with a serene smile and blaming everything on outside interference. One of the students could have used the spell right from the corridor. He justifies himself gracefully. The teacher frowns, trying to comprehend what he heard and smell a catch. The teacher turns around abruptly, loudly declaring his intention to find the true culprit of the commotion. Raito beams at the departing teacher, inwardly celebrating his victory. Meanwhile, Kusanagi, who has harbored a grudge, casts an angry glance at the back of his departing enemy, mentally promising revenge. Kazuki frowned in concentration, wondering if the others would be able to handle the beasts. Even after the disaster has officially come to an end, the streets continue to teem with nightmarish creatures. The guy decides to personally assess the situation at any cost. Under cover of night, he swiftly cuts through the air on a magical platform. Each step is accompanied by a flash of pure energy, accelerating his progress. With his face hidden under a hood, Kazuki floats against the backdrop of a huge full moon. He pushes away from the magic seal, turning into a blurry shadow. Glowing runes flare up beneath the boy's feet, giving him inhuman speed. Navigating through the rubble, Kazuki assesses the scale of the destruction. He notes that the police apparently managed to evacuate civilians. Kazuki's cold and focused gaze cuts through the night darkness. He lands gracefully on the raised platform, instantly assessing the situation. In the darkness, a terrifying voice of a monster is heard, begging for mercy. A frightened girl in uniform huddles to the ground, overcome with panic. The monster lets out a deafening roar, revealing rows of sharp teeth. At that very moment, Kazuki quickly appears nearby, shielding the victim from danger. The monster, in blind rage, rushes at the uninvited guest. A powerful blow cuts through space, raising clouds of stone chips, but Kazuki manages to dodge. He stands proudly over the trembling girl, blocking the path of danger. Kazuki's cold-blooded gaze doesn't express a drop of fear in the face of the monster. The emblem on the uniform raises eyebrows. Could this really be the magic police itself? The protective circuit flares up, and Kazuki finds himself in the very epicenter of the night clash. The blue circles of magic beneath his feet flare brighter as Kazuki rapidly closes the distance. Sharp blades of hostile magic cut through the air right behind him, but he doesn't slow down. His keen gaze under the hood notices every detail in this chaos. With a smooth, precise movement, Kazuki dodges another wave of deadly attacks. The guy's thoughts are full of quiet skepticism towards those who call themselves guardians of order. He notes with disdain how far the modern magical police have degenerated. Even a clash with an ordinary monster almost cost them their lives. Is this the level of professionals? A barely noticeable, cold smirk crosses Kazuki's face. However, these pseudo-heroes have clearly never encountered real power. He continues to move swiftly through the air, confidently controlling every magical flow. Meanwhile, in a different setting, specialists are demonstrating a strange crystal in a special flask. The instructor, with a serious expression, reminds the cadets of the key indicators of a magician. Kazuki, however, is perplexed as to whether these bulky devices are really necessary to assess forces. His patience is wearing thin. Are even the basic principles of perceiving magic still a mystery to those around him? Raito watches from the sidelines, remaining vigilant. The other cadets look at each other in confusion, not knowing how to react to what is happening. The blue-haired girl steps forward confidently, declaring her noble origins. Kazuki blinks his eyes in surprise upon hearing such a grandiose title. Kazuki just silently listens to the boastful speeches, internally perplexed by all this aristocratic fuss. There is a hint of doubt in his eyes. Is it really true that in this new world, origin means more than true strength? The girl herself surrounds herself with a weak haze of magic, sincerely believing in her superiority. She glances at Kazuki with incomprehension, genuinely offended that he dares to ignore such generous attention. Meanwhile, the hot-tempered Kusanagi Minato can barely contain his rage at the mere thought that someone dares to talk to Yuka like that. Kazuki just tiredly scratched the back of his head, mentally admitting that this girl's chatter was starting to seriously irritate him. Yuka sighs heavily, trying to swallow her pride and regain her cool, aristocratic composure. However, a dangerous glimmer of doubt flickers in her eyes. Yesterday's strangeness haunts her. She studies Kazuki closely, trying to unravel the mystery of how he managed to remain unharmed after taking a direct, magical strike. At this point, the moderator loudly calls on the remaining students to continue the assessment procedure. Raito perks up and hurries to take his turn with a cheerful smile. Yuka watches him go with a thoughtful gaze, anticipating the opportunity to finally appreciate the scale of someone else's power. Meanwhile, the impatient Kusanagi Minato is already eager to fight, enveloped in crimson flames. He places his hand on the magic crystal with a confident grin, ready to show everyone the full power of his gift. A bright flash illuminates the room, and an impressive number lights up on the monitor. Minato chuckled smugly, assessing the result: 1,000 units of fire magic. Kazuki crosses his arms over his chest from the side, deep in analytical analysis of what is happening. Finally, it is Yuki's turn, who proudly steps forward into the glow of the water element. The crystal responds with a powerful hum, producing a colossal result of 2,000 units of pure water magic. There's an immediate buzz of excitement, and a smug Minato quickly hurries to enroll them both in this year's elite. Kazuki can't believe his eyes. Is the result of the pride of the Mizuha house really just a measly 2,000? Raito's blue head glows with triumph, and a sly grin of superiority spreads across his face. Kazuki is seething with anger. That smug look is unbearable for a second. It's Kusanagi Minato's turn, whose name is announced to the entire audience. Those around him immediately begin to whisper, openly reminding him of his dubious magical potential. Kusanagi Minato makes a contemptuous remark, viciously goading the boy in front of everyone. Raito leisurely approaches the platform, anticipating his opponent's complete failure. Kazuki freezes in front of the measuring crystal, feeling the weight of the gazes fixed on him. Panic flares up inside him. In his past life, he already attracted too much unnecessary attention. Under the stern gazes of Raito and Kusanagi Minato, the boy frantically tries to figure out how not to reveal his true power, but it's too late to retreat. Kazuki resolutely reaches out his hand to the artifact, filling the space with sparks. An incredible flashing light instantly blinds everyone present in the hall. Kazuki bites his lip, mentally preparing himself to give it his all to test his hidden greatness. A powerful pulse of energy knocks those around it off their feet, causing the air to literally crack at the seams. Raito shudders, pressing his hands to his head in fear from the rising storm. The arrogant Kusanagi Minato at this moment looks like he has seen a ghost. Raito's eyes widen in horror. What madness is happening right before their eyes? The measuring device twitches wildly, unable to withstand the colossal pressure. A powerful shockwave destroys everyone in its path, forcing the students to flee amid screams of terror. Shards of the artifact fly in all directions, striking panic into the ranks of stunned spectators. Kazuki stands frozen in the midst of the destruction, reflecting on how the device broke just when he allowed himself to be a little more serious. His confused classmates wake up in the ruins, unsure if they are truly destined to awaken their magical gifts. The teacher rushes to the injured children in a panic, trying to assess the scale of the disaster. Kazuki remains unperturbed as the teacher quickly surveys the scene. Amidst the smoke and debris, the instructor looks with bewilderment at the irreparably damaged measuring apparatus. He shakes his head with a worried expression, realizing that due to the breakdown, they missed the chance to discover the boy's hidden potential and element. Kazuki just calmly asks if it's really that big of a problem. At this moment, Kusanagi Minato comes to life, with a sly grin offering to enroll him in his team. His loyal comrades are immediately at his side, supporting the leader's daring initiative. Kusanagi Minato squints slyly, anticipating something grand and dangerous. The teacher, stunned, agrees to this adventure, giving the boys an encouraging smile. Kusanagi Minato casts a meaningful glance at Kazuki, fervently declaring that he can't wait to work with them. Meanwhile, the ruins of the deserted city stood in an ominous silence under the rays of the midday sun. In the abandoned neighborhoods, a threat lurks in the form of a dangerous monster prowling among the rubble. A group of students led by a teacher arrives at an abandoned site to conduct a practical lesson. The teacher rushes to reassure the students, assuring them that the threat is minimal since most of the monsters have already been eliminated by professionals. Kazuki is skeptical about what is happening, realizing that it all looks too strange and staged. The monsters bare their teeth, preparing for a surprise attack on the unsuspecting newcomers. Reito, along with the other students, listens attentively to the instructions of the instructor as the atmosphere of imminent danger thickens around him. Amidst the carefree chatter of his classmates, Kazuki maintains a somber silence, understanding the gravity of the threat looming over them. Meanwhile, Reito intently surveys the destroyed ruins around her, ready to repel an attack at any moment. The mentor strictly encourages discipline among the cadets, demanding absolute coherence and teamwork from them. Kazuki steps aside alone, trying to stay away from the unnecessary noise and bustle. However, the solitude does not last long. A rough push in the back abruptly tears him out of his thoughts. Kusanagi Minato, surrounded by his loyal henchmen, blocks his path, declaring that no one will interfere with them now. Kazuki just sighs heavily, deciding not to hold back his pent-up anger any longer. Looming over him menacingly, Kusanagi furiously demands an answer, trying to find out the reason for Mizuha's sudden attention to him. Kazuki looks at the enraged bully with complete incomprehension and genuine bewilderment, but then Reito smiles slyly, noting that this whole storm of emotions is caused by banal jealousy. These words literally make Kusanagi lose her mind with rage, boiling inside with anger. Kazuki maintains an icy calm while his opponent burns with blind hatred. Ignoring the warnings, the enraged Kusanagi unleashes a powerful magical spell on him. A bright flash of fire blinds his eyes, but Kazuki doesn't even flinch under the onslaught of flames. As if not noticing the heat, he easily stops the attack, causing the bully to freeze in shock. A grimace of absolute disbelief at what is happening freezes on Kusanagi's face. The flash of magic fades, revealing the terrifying figure of the awakened monster. The faces of the bully and his retinue are distorted with primal horror. Cold fear grips their bodies, preventing them from uttering a single word in the face of an unknown force. A huge, ominous figure of a demonic soldier materializes right in front of the frightened boys. In a panic, the comrades beg Kusanagi Minato to deal with the monster immediately. Kusanagi Minato, with a confident smirk, calls upon a powerful spell, promising to quickly finish off the enemy. A blinding flash of magic falls upon the monster, raising clouds of dust and sparks. The satisfied students are already celebrating their victory, confident in the strength of their comrade. But when the smoke clears, the monster remains standing without a scratch. Kusanagi Minato freezes in shock, not believing his own eyes. Kazuki's cold voice sounds from behind, reminding him of the pitifully weak attack level. The monster's monstrous aura begins to press on the space with renewed vigor. Reito and the rest of his comrades finally lose their composure from the overwhelming horror. Kusanagi Minato's legs give way, and he falls to the ground. The unbearable oppressive force paralyzes their will to resist. Kusanagi Minato's face distorts with the realization of his impending death. He lets out a desperate cry as death already raises its clawed paw over him. The monster swings for the finishing blow, emitting deadly energy. Enormous claws hover just centimeters from the trembling boy. The demon himself freezes at this moment, having caught something unexpected. A heavy shadow looms over the fear-stricken students as Kazuki takes a step forward. Kazuki remains icy calm, towering over the situation with an unreadable expression. The atmosphere around is heating up to the limit, foreshadowing a completely different outcome of this battle. A monstrous shadow falls to the ground, looming over the students paralyzed with fear. A strange confidence flares up. Even an ordinary demon is able to assess the strength of an opponent. Kazuki steps forward, seizing the initiative with chilling composure. The terrifying monster raises its clawed paws, emitting a suffocating wave of energy around itself. Kazuki's magical aura explodes into a blinding flame, eclipsing everything around him. The monster lets out a death cry under the crushing weight of ancient spells. With a smooth movement of his hand, Kazuki activates a complex seal, preparing to strike. The frightened comrades just tremble on the sidelines, not believing what is happening. The space trembles as the destructive power of the second level is released. A blinding flash engulfs the battlefield, turning the area into the epicenter of the elements. Only a barely noticeable, cold smile touches Kazuki's lips at this moment. All that remains of the formidable demon are sparks and ashes scattering in the wind. The dust settles, revealing to the shocked boys the imperturbable figure of the winner. An ominous silence reigns all around, broken only by the crackling of the remaining flames. Kusanagi can't hide her shock and panic at what just happened. There is only one question in his head. How is this even possible? Kazuki continues to stand with his back to them, immersed in his own thoughts and oblivious to the shock of his comrades. For him, this was just a warm-up, because his hidden strength immeasurably exceeds normal standards. What worries him is something else. Where in the very heart of Shibuya do these creatures come from? A shard of a fallen enemy glows faintly on the grass, hinting at a far more sinister secret yet to be revealed. Kazuki frowned heavily, realizing the depth of the impending threat. Flashes of pain and screams of horror flash before my eyes, reminding me of the fragility of human life. Every moment of this nightmare is imprinted in my memory as an indelible scar. Even among the ruins and ashes, the pain of loss does not subside for a second. But there is no fear in Kazuki's eyes, only a cold determination to see this through to the end. In the silence of a deserted world, he makes an unbreakable promise to protect everyone, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Kusanagi Minato and the others can hardly believe their own eyes, trying to comprehend the incredible. Rage boils in Kusanagi Minato's blood, turning mistrust into a burning desire to release the pent-up tension. The sound of a fist hitting a stone wall reveals a storm of emotions that cannot be contained. Reito and the others are frozen in confusion, not knowing how to calm this sudden anger. Invisible magic once again reveals its destructive power, reminding us that the enemy never sleeps. Amidst the epic destruction, Reito and his companions watch in awe at the triumph. Reito straightens his shoulders proudly, not at all doubting his own greatness. Many secrets and unexpected encounters are hidden among the silent ruins. Kusanagi Minato gestures passionately, drawing his comrades into a heated argument. The ghostly outlines of the ruined city preserve the memory of the recent storm. Away from the noisy company of Kusanagi, Minato continues to emotionally prove his case. Reito watches from the sidelines, maintaining Olympian calm. The sight of a lone figure ahead makes Reito think about justice. Hiding in the shadow of a massive wall, Reito vigilantly watches every move of potential offenders. Raito's worried gaze falls on the battlefield, where her comrades find themselves face to face with a nightmarish creature of darkness. Her eyes reflect pure horror. This monster is clearly too much for beginners, and they are facing imminent death. Her consciousness cries out for help, reminding her of her proud origins in the Mizuha clan, which does not allow her to stand aside. With a sharp jerk, Reito rushes forward, intending to intervene in the deadly battle and save his friends. A flash of furious flame blinds her vision as a powerful blow lands right in front of her. A blinding wave of fire throws Reito back, causing him to gasp in pain and surprise. But right from the epicenter of the explosion, Kazuki confidently steps out, dispelling the remnants of magic with a light wave of his hand. Reito freezes in amazement, not believing his own eyes and trying to comprehend the scale of what happened. This quiet and inconspicuous guy now seems like a completely different person, confident, dangerous, and incomprehensible. The question was spinning feverishly in his head. How was he able to defeat the powerful guardian without a single spell or preparation? Thoughts return to the harsh hierarchy of forces, where each monster has its own strict rank of danger. The 6th level is occupied by wild magical beasts, capable of tearing an unprepared magician to pieces. The 5th tier is reserved for the terrifying magical guardians, whose power inspires awe even among veterans. The 4th is occupied by merciless demons who bring destruction to all living things. The 3rd level is the level of supreme demons, the rulers of the dark planes. The 2nd level belongs to the insidious demons who weave intrigues in the shadows. And crowning this terrible pyramid is absolute evil, the devil himself, Satan, whose name makes the worlds tremble. Learned magicians know well that to defeat a guardian, at least the 3rd rank of strength is required. Defeating him at rank 1 is an absolute, physically impossible miracle that defies the very nature of magic. Reito abruptly retreats into the protective shadow of the wall, looking fearfully at Kazuki's approaching silhouette, and in confusion asks himself, why is she hiding from him at all? Kazuki's sudden appearance catches Reito off guard right at his hiding place. The guy's cold gaze pierces the silence, and his caustic remark about a dubious hobby makes Reito blush deeply. Trying to save face, Reito awkwardly makes an excuse, but her embarrassment only gives her away. Kazuki continues to stare at her imperturbably, as if trying to unravel the true motives behind this strange pursuit. Suddenly, the tension mounts, and Kazuki abruptly looks away, turning all his attention to the gloomy ruins around him. He sighs heavily, deciding not to waste time on empty arguments with the spy caught off guard. Reito pauses in indecision, looking at the broad back of the guy, who is clearly about to leave. She is the first to break down and, in fear, throws a timid attempt to stop him after him. Leto demands an immediate explanation, feeling the situation slipping out of her control. But Kazuki doesn't even turn around, continuing to confidently walk forward as if not noticing her panic. From the heights of a ruined building, he looks down at the miniature figure of Raito, stuck below among the gray walls. Kazuki touches his chin thoughtfully, assessing the scale of the upcoming cleanup. Taking a look around the gloomy city blocks, he decides not to stand on ceremony any longer. His keen internal radar instantly detects a gathering of enemies. Although there are no guards left nearby, there are still plenty of aggressive magical beasts here. Kazuki lets out a quiet breath, steeling himself for the battle ahead. Instantly, the boy's aura flares with a blinding golden light, shaking the air around him with a heavy wave of mana. Magic circles made of pure energy rapidly unfold on either side of Kazuki, ready to unleash destructive power. Powerful streams of golden energy burst from the seals, filling the ruins with a blinding glow. The mana core pierces the heavens with a deafening roar, splitting the air with powerful bolts of energy. Blinding rays of light shoot upward, cutting through the clouds and signaling the beginning of a merciless massacre of the monsters. There is complete chaos all around, and the stunned students cannot believe their eyes as they watch the raging elements. Raito barely has time to follow what is happening, amazed by the colossal concentration of mana in the air. Meanwhile, Kusanagi Minato looks on with alarm at the approaching threat, realizing that there are too many monsters for a normal training session. One of the ferocious beasts rushes straight at the defenseless girl with a wild roar. The monster's terrifying mouth strikes a fatal blow over its victim, frozen in horror. But at the last moment, a blinding flash cuts through space, saving the situation. The girl falls to the ground in shock, and the defeated beast collapses lifelessly in clouds of smoke. Kazuki watches from above, assessing the scale of the disaster he has caused. He nods with satisfaction, noting that the cleanup is going strictly according to plan. However, the power of his attack exceeds all expectations, causing Kazuki to become slightly nervous. The remnants of the once formidable herd are defeated, their bodies literally torn apart by a crushing blow. Looking over the results of his work, Kazuki realizes that he went a bit overboard with the destruction. He rubs the back of his head awkwardly, mentally scolding himself for being overly zealous. After all this was intended to be just an educational process, but it almost destroyed half the city. Kazuki decides to quickly cover up the traces of his triumph. Using displacement magic, he instantly appears below, hoping to remain unnoticed. He reasons that there is no need to hide his strength forever, but he absolutely does not need any extra attention right now. Meanwhile, the surviving members of the group gather around the fallen carcasses, trying to come to terms with what happened. They look around the battlefield in complete bewilderment, unable to understand how an entire herd could have been destroyed in an instant. Death by a single precise blow reveals the signature of a true master, leaving witnesses to wonder who this mysterious hero is. The elementless magic that rained down upon the enemies like a hail of countless projectiles left the grown man in absolute shock. Facing a whole herd of dangerous creatures at once is beyond his usual experience, and he understands that the students cannot survive alone. Having survived a mortal threat, the frightened teenagers have difficulty comprehending the scale of the horror they have experienced and miraculously escaped death. Realizing the gravity of his mistake, the inspector bows low, offering his sincere apologies for his negligence. His voice trembled with tension because they were supposed to just watch from the sidelines, not send children into the thick of mortal danger. With a heavy heart, he admits his guilt to the frightened students, reproaching himself for his frivolity. Amidst the general confusion, a timid voice breaks the silence with a question that worries everyone: who saved them from certain death? The man frowns, frantically trying to fit the puzzle pieces together into a coherent picture. Suspicion falls on those whose presence here is outside the law, since official forces would have arrived quite differently. However, the undeniable fact remains: a mysterious savior pulled them back from the brink of death, and now all they can do is express their gratitude to him. Kazuki maintains a calm expression, as if what happened had nothing to do with him. Meanwhile, heated debates break out among the surviving students. Some enthusiastically discuss the incredible spectacle, hardly believing their eyes. Kazuki casts a calm glance at the situation, making sure that the main threat has passed and no one else has been hurt. Kusanagi Minato's fiery gaze pierces the air, hiding a dangerous determination behind the bravado. The rest of the comrades watch what is happening with great interest, not knowing what to expect from their comrades. Raito studies the situation closely, noting the strange details of this massacre. Frightening thoughts of a monstrous force capable of doing something like this flash through her memory. She frantically goes through the facts, trying to comprehend the incredible: is Kusanagi Minato really capable of such a thing? Raito can't wrap his head around the idea that one person could combine the incompatible, surpassing all conceivable laws of magic. A stunned Raito looks at Kazuki with a mixture of awe and disbelief, trying to see behind his mask of indifference. Kusanagi Minato seethes with rage, making threats that are laced with absolute uncertainty. The rest of the gang look at each other, feeling growing discomfort from this whole absurd situation. Kusanagi Minato demonstratively closes the distance, his whole appearance showing his readiness to break away at any moment. His comrades whisper behind his back, beginning to seriously suspect something amiss in the behavior of their mysterious opponent. Kusanagi Minato's anger reaches its boiling point, turning into a blind thirst for revenge. Meanwhile, Kazuki walks alone through the quiet streets, completely unaware of the storm that is rising ahead. A sudden seizing of the initiative, Kazuki's path is completely blocked by a hostile crowd. Kusanagi Minato's face distorts with anger, anticipating imminent reprisal. Kazuki remains icy calm as he throws a dismissive remark into the crowd. Kusanagi Minato explodes with new insults, unable to tolerate such insolence. Kazuki watches this circus with a slight grin, infuriating his opponents even more. Kusanagi Minato finally loses his mind, refusing to believe his eyes. Kazuki sighs heavily, tired of this meaningless kindergarten. Kusanagi Minato approaches closely, demanding an explanation and calling for an answer. Outside observers watch the unfolding drama in silence, holding their breath. Kazuki spreads his hands, as if apologizing for being smarter than everyone around him. Kusanagi Minato loses the last of his self-control, starting to scream. With a sharp movement, Kusanagi Minato throws his body forward, putting all his pent-up anger into a crushing blow. The fist hits its target, tearing through the air to the roar of the tense crowd. A moment later, a veritable hail of blows falls upon Kazuki from all sides. Kusanagi Minato grins in rage, not understanding how this guy can be so impenetrable. His scarlet eyes burn with anger, but the enemy doesn't even move. The blows rain down one after another, but for Kazuki it's like hitting a stone wall. The automatic protection works flawlessly, absorbing any damage without a single scratch. Kazuki is even bored. So much fuss is giving him a headache, he might as well pretend to be the victim. He lazily looks up at the enraged hooligans as they continue their rampage. Suddenly, a sharp cry cuts through the air, causing the bullies to freeze instantly. Raito appears in front of them with a menacing and determined expression on his face. Kusanagi Minato's expression instantly changes, swallowing the lump in his throat. The rebel's face shows pure superstitious surprise mixed with panic. He immediately tries to slow down, making awkward excuses to the headman who has arrived. Leto refuses to listen to excuses, scolding the bullies for behavior so unworthy of a magic academy. Her ringing voice rings with indignation, calling her offenders to their conscience. Inwardly, Kusanagi Minato is already cursing this day and everything around him. There is only one thought swirling around in his head: this arrogant guy is solely to blame for everything. Suddenly, an icy and sharp grip interrupts his thoughts. Kusanagi Minato gasps, not believing what's happening. The hands are intertwined in an unambiguous gesture, plunging the culprit into complete shock. Kusanagi Minato's face darkens with a dark aura of uncontrollable rage. All the rage and pent-up anger spills out in a cry of despair. Kusanagi is to blame for everything. Kazuki only sighs quietly, assessing the scale of the impending disaster. A flash of blind rage clouds the bully's eyes. Kusanagi Minato is ready to grind the offender into dust. Raito freezes in horror, not believing his eyes and trying to stop the madman. The magical seals flare with devastating force, turning the air into a hot funnel. Kazuki reacts instantly, shielding his companion and issuing a warning. A powerful explosion shakes the area, sweeping away everything in its path with a blinding wave. Raito is thrown back by the shockwave, shielding herself from the flying debris. Kusanagi Minato smirks smugly, confident in his complete impunity. His henchmen look at each other in fear, realizing what this thoughtless step has led to. But the instigator himself is already making plans to shift all the blame onto an accidental mistake. At this moment, the thick dust and smoke begin to clear, revealing something unexpected. Heavy footsteps break the silence, causing even the most self-confident to freeze. Kazuki emerges from the clearing fog with a cold and unyielding expression on his face. His icy gaze does not bode well for those who thought he was defeated. Raito comes to his senses, watching what is happening in amazement. Kusanagi Minato is almost speechless from shock because his magic was supposed to destroy his opponent. Disbelief gives way to panic. How can one remain on one's feet after such a powerful blow? Kazuki's cold voice cuts through the silence, causing the culprits to shudder at the realization of their own blindness. But instead of repenting, Kusanagi Minato breaks into hysterical screams, shifting the blame onto someone else's superiority. The situation is escalating to the limit, and it seems that it will no longer be possible to avoid a new clash. Blinded by arrogance, bullies prepare a crushing blow, confident of their absolute impunity. A powerful stream of flame soars into the sky, ready to wipe the impudent Kusanagi Minato from the face of the earth. But Kazuki remains icy calm, his lips only slightly parted before he responds. With a gentle snap of his fingers, he activates a hidden mechanism, unleashing a strange and frightening technique. The surrounding area is instantly filled with strange green lashes, plunging Kusanagi Minato and his henchmen into a primal terror. Magical fetters bind their bodies as they move, preventing the hooligans from even moving. A second later, the opponents are defeated and lie helplessly on the ground, having exhausted all their strength. Kazuki lazily settles himself on the fallen enemy, noting to himself how paltry their energy reserves are. Reito watches in shock, unable to believe the sudden outcome of the battle. Kazuki turns around indifferently and slowly walks away, as if nothing special had happened. Reito is still in shock, trying to comprehend the scale of what happened. Her thoughts are tangled into a feverish tangle of questions. How did a guy who didn't have magic do this? Hot-tempered accusations give way to genuine shock and confusion in the face of an unknown force. Kazuki just sighs heavily, tired of this useless performance. He glances at his companion, hinting that it would be more appropriate to hear completely different words from her. Reito looks down in embarrassment, blushing and finally squeezing out awkward words of gratitude. She remains standing in the middle of the yard, blinking her eyes in confusion in the ringing silence. But when the girl looks back at the place where the hero stood, it turns out to be empty. The darkness of the night hides the figure of Kazuki, who rushes across the rooftops at incredible speed under the cover of darkness. His silhouette quickly dissolves in the glow of magical runes, rushing towards new secrets. Kazuki hides his face under his hood, listening to the night silence of the city. A terrifying picture unfolds before him. Monsters that should have long ago turned to dust are once again roaming the streets. He senses alien vibrations of magic and realizes that the creatures have filled the entire area. The patrol mages are clearly not up to the job, and their level of power is disappointing. The guy wonders how long this will go on and what he should do. He soars into the air, cutting through the night air against the backdrop of a giant moon. In the blink of an eye, Kazuki activates his battle runes, unleashing devastating power on the monsters. An unsuspecting passerby strolls carefree along the night street. A huge, toothy creature creeps up silently from behind, preparing to deliver the killing blow. A predatory mouth opens over a man who understands nothing. But at the most critical moment, Kazuki appears nearby with lightning speed, averting the threat. The rescued man turns around in surprise, realizing what he had just been on the verge of. The guy lands deftly next to him, leaving the monster behind. He casts a calm glance at the rescued man before disappearing into the darkness. One of the random witnesses manages to capture the mysterious savior on camera. The video of the mysterious magician immediately spreads across the internet, causing widespread admiration. Meanwhile, the Academy's management summons students for a serious conversation. The mentors report alarming events that have shaken the entire city. Reito and Kazuki listen carefully to the report, realizing the scale of the impending threat. Kusanagi Minato demands an immediate explanation, not hiding his irritation. Tensions in the principal's office reach breaking point when the Academy's management calls the students onto the carpet. Unpleasant details emerge about a recent incident involving illegal use of magic outside the Academy. Reito and Kazuki listen carefully to the report, realizing the scale of the impending threat. Kusanagi Minato demands an immediate explanation, not hiding his irritation. The situation escalates to the limit as opponents begin to shift blame onto each other. Kazuki struggles to hide his irony as he watches the skill with which this brazen lie sounds. The situation seems absurd, but remaining silent in this mess is definitely not an option. The crowd behind Kusanagi Minato immediately starts making noise, denying any accusations. The girl with bright blue hair is not going to stand silently by and tolerate injustice. Her voice is sharp and uncompromising as she points to the real instigators of the unrest. The Academy's leadership is hanging on every word, trying to get to the truth. But in response, there is a furious statement of self-defense and complete innocence from Kusanagi Minato. Kazuki's eyes widen in surprise, not expecting such a turn of events. At this point, the opponent's nerves finally give way, turning to open shouting. Emotions run high, turning a serious matter into an emotional farce. The atmosphere is heating up to the limit, revealing the true motives and ambitions of the parties to the conflict. The cold gaze of the blue-haired girl stops this circus, returning everyone to reality. One of the instigators starts shouting, trying to prove his superiority at any cost. Kazuki watches this spectacle through the shadows, assessing the enemy's weaknesses. The mad gleam in the screamer's eyes gives him away, turning a serious conversation into a farce. Raito watches the scene unfolding before her eyes with a distrustful squint. Kusanagi Minato loses his composure, exploding with overwhelming emotions. His piercing scream and gesticulations betray deep shock at the absurdity of what is happening. Kazuki calmly observes the consequences of others' actions while maintaining his distance. The surrounding authority figures watch the conflict unfold with bewilderment. The senior mentor in his chair freezes, astonished by such an unexpected turn of events. The fallen man's comrades freeze in horror, not believing what has happened. Kazuki and Raito calmly listen to the official statements from the management. The girl instantly flares up with anger, unable to contain her righteous indignation. Her voice grows louder, denouncing the injustice of what is happening within these walls. Kusanagi Minato tries to get a word in, but is cut off mid-sentence. Kazuki casts a searching glance at his companion, full of hidden meaning. She just blinks her eyelashes in surprise, confused by his sudden tone. The guy methodically reminds her of past moments when she tried to protect him. Past clashes and tense moments from their time studying together flash through their minds. Kazuki suddenly gives a compliment, causing Leito to be taken aback in surprise. The color instantly floods the girl's face, depriving her of her usual confidence. She covers her face with her hands in embarrassment, trying to hide her embarrassment and disappearing from sight. The guy follows her with a warm, slightly sly look, remaining alone with his thoughts. Deep internal changes forever change who he was before. Kazuki stands thoughtfully by the window, wondering what he's gotten himself into again. The academy's director listens with restraint to a report about a recent incident involving the use of forbidden spells. The situation is under strict control, and the leadership assures that civilians are safe. This official tone does not reassure Mizuharuku in the least, because far more dangerous intrigues are being woven behind the scenes. Exchanging routine pleasantries with the director, she transparently hints at her father's serious financial leverage. An influential family is ready to support the academy if the scales tip in the right direction. Meanwhile, in the corridors, people are already whispering about Kusanagi Minato's unexpected triumph. Kazura Ryuji is skeptical about the scale of the destruction and the abilities of the daring newcomer. But instead of fear, a predatory gleam of genuine interest can be seen in his eyes. Kusanagi Minato, on the other hand, prefers to abstract himself from all this fuss, enjoying the silence. Raito bursts into his comrade's serenity with shining eyes, waving his smartphone. The latest news is full of headlines about a mysterious magician in black who has stirred up the entire area. Kazuki just glances lazily at the screen, silently praying that his own modest persona will remain in the shadows. What difference does he make to these showy showdowns of the elite if he just wants peace? But the peace proves to be only a fleeting illusion when the classroom doors swing open with a sharp bang. The teacher calls Kusanagi Minato to account with authority, cutting off all attempts to escape attention. Kazuki and Raito, accompanied by their loyal comrades, head towards the exit, feeling the tension growing. They look around the restored corridors, trying to figure out what the academy is preparing for this time. Raito casts a determined look, burning with anticipation to see his friend's true power in action. As caddices that are ended, Raito freezes in surprise, not believing his eyes. Familiar faces are spotted in the crowd of students, and the tension in the air increases. Raito blinks his eyes in confusion, trying to comprehend what is happening. A familiar figure appears again among those gathered, raising even more questions. Raito frowns, wondering what brought her to this dangerous place. Kazuki glances at his confused companion, wondering if she shares his suspicions. Meanwhile, it is Kusanagi Minato's turn to go to the magic terminal. The guy is a little tense because last time his power almost destroyed the equipment. Kusanagi Minato carefully concentrates his energy, trying not to repeat past mistakes. After Kusanagi's outburst, Minato breathes heavily, bending over in exhaustion. The mentor breathes a sigh of relief, believing that this time everything went well. But sudden surprise replaces joy when the system produces an absurd result. Raito looks at the screen in complete shock. The system mercilessly records the complete absence of elements. Those around begin to whisper, openly mocking the ridiculous figures. Some are already openly grinning, considering such results to be natural for such a weak student. Kusanagi Minato tries to save face, pretending that everything is going according to plan. The mentor rushes to reassure the boy, reminding him that standard tests do not always reflect true strength. However, Leto remembers very well what Kusanagi Minato is truly capable of, and what destructive talents he possesses. The embarrassed guy looks away, trying to hide his confusion. Leto is at a loss as to how to control the amount of magic to such an extent seems simply impossible. Kazuki sighs heavily, wiping sweat from his forehead, but despite all the difficulties, the result exceeds all expectations. Fine-tuning the magic took a lot of effort, but the main trick was a great success. Soon, Kazuki and Leto appear at the door of the classroom, attracting everyone's attention. The footsteps stop when uninvited guests come into view. The door swings open, and senior students with stern faces stand before them. Kazuki looks at the unexpected visitors with cold calm. The stranger with long turquoise hair immediately declares her high origin. The guy frowns slightly, trying to understand the motives for this sudden meeting. The tension in the air grows with every step of the uninvited guest. She turns around abruptly, showering her companion with reproaches. The senior student mercilessly reminds her of her recent shame and inability to stand up for herself. Rumors about a mysterious guy with colossal strength had already reached her. The girl with blue hair only mutteredly confirms the truth of these conversations. Without hiding her irritation, the senior student unleashes a barrage of reproaches on her for lagging behind on all fronts. Excellence in everything from studies to magic seems like an incontrovertible fact to her. The pressure of elder authority hangs over the girl like a heavy burden. Painful memories of past defeats and humiliations come to mind. Memories take her back to the days of grueling training, where she finds herself defeated once again. Flashbacks reveal the power gap between them, leaving them doubting their own abilities. A cold wind rushes between the silent rocks, where two figures stand frozen, immersed in a heavy premonition. Raito looks at her friend with a stern, piercing gaze, delivering a merciless verdict. The girl's eyes were filled with incomprehension, followed by bitter despair. Every word echoes in her heart like an icy blade, leaving no room for hope. The fragile girl, with tears in her eyes, cringes under the weight of this cruel sentence. Raito's face distorts with cold contempt for other people's unrealistic illusions. Fingers nervously crumple the fabric of the uniform, revealing a storm of suppressed emotions. A stifled whisper barely escapes from trembling lips, ready to burst into tears from helplessness. Kazuki watches what is happening with cold blood, considering other people's ambitions to be stupid arrogance. A sudden attack breaks the silence, causing those around to tense up to the limit. Standing at the board, Kazuki calmly parries other people's attacks, not allowing them to manipulate the conversation. But the mocking tone only adds fuel to the fire, provoking a new outburst of anger. Anger clouds the eyes, making one forget about manners and rules of decency. Kazuki remains adamant, rejecting any attempts to impose someone else's will. The words hit the mark, reminding us of the bitter truth we have been running from for so long. The pain of loss and the awareness of one's own insignificance overwhelm me again. The image of a self-confident, excellent student now seems like just a pathetic mask. She clung to the illusion of her own exclusivity until the very end. A lonely figure sinks into a thick fog of despair, losing its footing. But in Kazuki's dark eyes, a spark of determination is already igniting, capable of changing everything. Raito clenches his fists, feeling despair rising in his throat. Disbelief distorts her face as she asks again, barely believing what she heard. But Kazuki is calm. He clearly has no need to rush. Everything is going according to his plan. She crosses her arms over her chest, issuing a bold challenge, a 2-on-2 duel, period. Kazuki only smiles with the corner of his lips, assessing the scale of someone else's self-confidence. The rivals do not hide their contempt, confident of their absolute victory. But Kazuki isn't about to retreat into the shadows. He's making his participation known loudly. He stands with unshakable confidence, ready to accept any rules of the game. Raito freezes in shock, not knowing whether to be happy or panic. And Kazuki continues to radiate absolute calm, contrasting with the general tension. Raito swallows hard, trying to comprehend the scale of the madness that is happening. Kazuki puts an end to the argument, leaving no room for unnecessary words. He coldly states the condition: if they win, their opponents must get out of their way. The opponents take up the bets, declaring that if they triumph, Raito will be immediately expelled from the academy. They throw out arrogant parting words, anticipating an easy reprisal against the newcomers. On the windy roof of the academy, a scene unfolds that will change the balance of power forever. Raito takes a desperate step forward, saying something that changes the very essence of what is happening. Kazuki's eyes widen in bewilderment. Was he really called to the roof for such an unexpected request? He looks at himself skeptically, not understanding how he deserved such an honor. But in Kazuki's dark eyes, a spark of determination is already igniting, capable of changing everything. Raito looks at her comrade with inspiration, confident that behind the outward modesty lies incredible power, surpassing even her own abilities. Kazuki freezes in slight bewilderment, digesting such a loud and unexpected statement. Raito's nervousness gives her away completely, because now the puzzle comes together. No wonder he spoke with such confidence about defeating her sister. Kazuki only sighs, mentally acknowledging the straightforwardness of his interlocutor, who is used to dividing the world exclusively into black and white. Suddenly, Raito abruptly changes his tone and asks for help with embarrassment, causing Kazuki to be slightly confused by such a sudden change in mood. The guy looks away slightly, as if considering the offer, but internally, he is already ready to give in under such pressure. Raito can barely contain his excitement, his eyes widening at the unexpected agreement. Kazuki agrees, but immediately sets a strict condition, strict obedience to his rules and no escapes halfway. Raito fervently assures that she had no intention of retreating, ready to follow her mentor to the end. Kazuki, however, reasons pragmatically it's impossible to refuse a girl's sincere request, and the extra practice will benefit both of them. Taking a look around, he thoughtfully decides where exactly it would be best to conduct the upcoming training session. Raito awkwardly tugs at the hem of his clothes and suddenly suggests continuing the lesson at her place. The scene cuts to a spacious traditional mansion surrounded by green treetops. Leto explains that her father is an influential magical aristocrat, so this kind of environment is quite normal for their family. However, the full piquancy of the situation immediately dawns on her, and she burns with shame, realizing how inviting a guy overlooks from the outside. Trying to hide her embarrassment, she begins to panic, but immediately convinces herself that there is nothing special about it. Kazuki suddenly breaks the silence, calling her by name, Yuika. The girl flinches in surprise, blushing deeply, and not understanding why he suddenly decided to break the chain of command. Kazuki calmly explains that since her sister has the same name, calling her by her last name would create confusion. Yuika lowers her gaze in embarrassment, admitting he is right, and quietly agrees to this treatment. Raito is talking animatedly about the nature of sorcery, but Kazuki raises an eyebrow skeptically. The girl continues to spout memorized truths, confident that magic is nothing more than rigid algorithms and unchanging frameworks. She categorically states that the limit of one's powers is set from birth, and spells are just automatic programs. Raito places his hands on his hips in triumph, expecting praise for such deep knowledge. But Kazuki coldly and categorically shatters her confidence, declaring that all her judgments are lies. Such a blow causes Raito to feel an almost childish resentment and tears in his eyes from the injustice. Kazuki, at this moment, feels deeply confused, wondering what this world has become in half a century. He patiently takes up the training, explaining that magic permeates all of nature and spells serve only as an auxiliary tool. Raito is shocked by what she hears, as it completely contradicts everything she was taught. The guy interrupts any arguments, intending to prove the validity of his words in practice. He asks his companion to sit on the ground and close her eyes, because without personal experience, it is useless to move forward. Raito is confused and doubts whether it is even possible to sense what is hidden from the eyes. Without waiting for an answer, Kazuki lightly touches her shoulder, activating hidden mechanisms. At that very moment, a powerful burst of azure energy explodes around them in a blinding radiance. Streams of pure magic gushes forth, causing the air to tremble with colossal tension. Raito's eyes widen, shocked by the sight that greets her as the previously invisible becomes tangible. She finally understands the true meaning of his words about feeling magic and perceiving the flows of nature. Kazuki calmly instructs her, pointing out that it is precisely this unity with the world that she must strive for above all else. Wiping her nose, Raito proudly declares that as a representative of the renowned Mizuha family, she will handle everything in no time. However, the harsh reality turns out to be different. Only after a powerful boost from outside does she manage to take the first step, which leads Kazuki to the gloomy conclusion that Yuika lacks natural talent. Sunlight floods the quiet training yard, where it will be decided whether Yuika can handle the stubborn magic. But instead of confident steps, the training begins with the usual grimaces and desperate attempts by Raito to cope with his own emotions. Kazuki just sighs heavily, watching as a whole week of hard work flies through his fingers, leaving the basic principles intact. The deadline is looming, and the looming exam is making them both even more nervous. Suddenly, a spark of insight flashes in Raito's eyes, replacing despair with predatory determination. Her eyes widen in surprise as the very essence of magic appears before her with the first rays of a previously invisible world. The fingertips begin to tingle from the fragile, yet very real, glowing particles. It seems the long-awaited breakthrough has finally happened, and Mana is submitting to her will for the first time. Reito's gaze involuntarily falls on Kazuki, wondering how powerful his hidden potential looks. But even without the runes activating, Kazuki's aura radiates the calm, almost frightening confidence of an experienced fighter. Appreciating his friend's efforts, Kazuki nods approvingly, although he understands perfectly well that the real tests are still ahead. He patiently explains the mechanics of mana consumption, turning dry theory into a visual guide to survival. According to him, the complete depletion of the reserve is not a collapse, but only the first step towards the expansion of internal borders. Having mastered the theory, Kazuki moves on to practice with unwavering calm. His words sound like a challenge, forcing Raito to cast aside his last doubts and accept the rules of the game. Raito smirked confidently, taking a fighting stance and ready to unleash all of her accumulated power on her mentor. Kazuki throws off his jacket, revealing a determined and ready face. Yuika quickly closes the distance, her whole demeanor showing that she intends to squeeze the most out of her newfound power. Water currents swirl into furious vortices, transforming into deadly blades under Raito's control. But the next moment, Kazuki parries the attack with a light movement of his hand, turning the raging elements into an obedient instrument. Kazuki confidently waves his hand, erecting a complex geometric structure of pure energy in front of him. Raito freezes in surprise, not believing his own eyes, as her spell literally vanishes into thin air. Like an experienced mentor, Kazuki demonstrates a basic defensive barrier, explaining that without breaking through this barrier, victory is out of the question. Before Raito can even come to his senses, Kazuki immediately reminds him of the value of mobility in a real magical duel. Gathering his strength, Raito goes on the offensive again, unleashing a new barrage of furious water blades on his enemy. But her attacks are once again shattered by an invisible wall, causing Raito to lose his strength and fall heavily onto the cold stone. Kazuki comes closer and extends his hand, offering a break, but his words sound like a harsh judgment on her previous habits. The guy patiently explains the essence of true mastery, claiming that a real magician is able to control power without a single word. To prove his point, Kazuki instantly activates the fire element without any lengthy incantations, striking the target with pinpoint precision. Raito watches in shock as her own mana begins to dissipate without a trace under the pressure of someone else's will. Kazuki coldly and calculatingly reveals the secrets of ultimate mana control that completely changes the rules of the game. The realization of what he heard literally exploded Raito's consciousness. Is it really possible to do without memorizing formulas? However, Kazuki immediately cools her ardor, reminding her that she still has a long way to go through spell reduction to achieve absolute control. A spark of genuine hope lights up in Raito's eyes as she realizes the incredible power she could achieve in the future. But it was clearly too early to relax, because Kazuki was already hovering over her with the unwavering intention of reinforcing the lesson learned right now. Raito panics as she realizes that she is about to continue the harsh training that is already making her head spin. Another demonstration of magical power from Kazuki makes the world around him tremble under the onslaught of a dense aura. Raito's face contorts with horror and despair in the face of another inevitable storm. An exhausted Raito lies on the ground, emitting a light smoke, while Kazuki coldly reminds her of the daily schedule of their torment. With difficulty coming to his senses, Raito desperately tries to disown this nightmarish prospect, but arguing with the harsh reality is already useless. The night is torn apart by flashes of magic, and Kazuki quickly covers the distance, leaving only traces of blue glow in his wake. Hiding his face under a hood, he looks around the battlefield and, with grim weariness, states that there is no end in sight to this nightmare. His keen gaze notices something unexpected, causing him to instantly become wary. In a dark alley, a monster looms over a defenseless passerby, preparing to deliver a fatal blow. Kazuki doesn't hesitate for a second. A magic circle flares up under his feet, launching a rapid dash. A sparkling barrier blocks the monster's path at the most critical moment, protecting the frightened girl. With one deft movement, Kazuki finds himself next to the hostage of the situation, instantly assessing the situation. With shaking hands, the frightened city resident hastily pokes at the phone screen, barely comprehending what has happened. Kazuki casts a heavy, bewildered look at her, sincerely not understanding the ingratitude that reigns around her. Meanwhile, at the training ground, Kazuki continues to wear Raito down with harsh training. Another attack sends an exhausted Raito face first into the stone. She barely stays on her knees, gasping for air after the crushing blow. Kazuki coldly assesses her progress, pointing out the obvious imbalance in technique. Raito listens to his words with his head bowed, trying to cope with the approaching despair. The pain of constant comparisons with her successful sister burns inside, forcing her to clench her fists until her fingers hurt. But despite all the defeats and losses, her determination to wield magic remains unwavering. Kazuki calmly points out weak points, but Leto demands maximum severity from him. Hearing this, Kazuki grins sinisterly and promises to stop holding back his destructive power. Reito only bristles in response, confident that such an approach will only accelerate her development. And Mars. At the training ground, Kazuki displays composure, erecting a strong barrier in the face of a surprise attack. A stream of pure magic crashes against the shimmering shield, but the young man holds his ground without a single unnecessary movement. The sunset bathes the horizon in soft light as Kazuki silently carries a tired Leto on his back after a grueling training session. The girl breathes heavily, trying to regain her strength, but her eyes still burn with excitement and a desire to surpass herself. Kazuki, on the other hand, looks like he's not tired at all, radiating confidence and hidden power near the ruins of the protective barrier. Reito falls exhausted onto the stone slab, her arms spread out, but a happy smile of victory sits on her face. Kazuki looks at her friend with approval, noting to himself her perseverance and colossal progress. Having swapped her athletic uniform for the academy's formal dress, Reito confidently walks next to Kazuki, ready for new challenges. A sudden noise catches their attention, causing both of them to turn warily towards the source of the commotion. A wall of reporters instantly forms around them, their camera flashes blinding their eyes and their questions raining down. Intrusive journalists besiege Yuka, demanding sensational news and details of the upcoming family conflict. Kazuki watches this circus with bewilderment, frowning in disbelief at the hype surrounding the big name. Magical duels are a rarity in their world, and therefore any clash between nobles immediately becomes public knowledge. The arena gradually fills with spectators anticipating a grand spectacle and intense competition. Students from all faculties take their places in the stands, animatedly discussing the upcoming match. In the shade of the awning, Kazuki watches the proceedings, appreciating the scale of the event. Reito lowers his head tiredly, experiencing the last minutes before entering the arena. The organizers call the participants, and the voice of fate sounds like a sentence for Reito, who is not ready for such attention. A sharp shout makes the girl flinch in surprise, and Kazuki behind her ominously plunges into darkness. Panic grips Reito for a moment, but the determination within her proves stronger than her fear of facing the crowd. Reito freezes, taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. Kazuki gives her a meaningful look, encouraging her without further ado. A realization flashes in her eyes. There is nowhere left to retreat. She straightens up proudly, defiantly declaring her readiness. Her thoughts return to Kazuki, whose words strangely give her strength. The figure of her rival looms before her, radiating a chilling superiority. Looking down at Reito, she makes a caustic remark. But Reito is not going to lose heart and answers with unshakable confidence. The sarcasm in the opponent's voice only adds fuel to the fire. She reminds him with a disdainful look who exactly Reito challenged. The momentary tension makes Reito clench his fists in impotent anger, but her opponent continues to put psychological pressure on her, mocking her ambitions. Reito feels like a tiny bird in the face of a huge storm. The opponent's powerful magical aura weighs heavily on the arena. But even in the face of overwhelming power, Reito vows to himself to endure to the end. The long-awaited signal to begin the duel sounds. Leto instantly raises his hand, activating the spell at maximum speed. The opponent doesn't lag behind, instantly responding with a mirror attack. Kazuki watches the collision from the sidelines with dispassion, analyzing every moment. Deadly water discs cut through the air, opening the scoring for this frantic battle. With incredible effort, Reito manages to soften the crushing blow of the elements, negating most of the damage. She looks at her own hands in amazement, realizing that her hidden potential has finally awakened. Her rival coldly assesses her success, reminding her of the colossal progress she has made in just a couple of weeks. Embarrassed by the unexpected praise, Leto can barely contain her joy, blushing from embarrassment. The opponent immediately becomes embarrassed, looking away in embarrassment and trying to pretend that she had no intention of praising her at all. But her stern attitude returns instantly, because the decisive stage of the fight lies ahead. Colossal mana begins to concentrate around her, foreshadowing the inevitable increase in the spell's rank. Reito tries to block the attack, but a powerful water barrier crushes her defense in an instant. A furious stream of second-tier water blitz pierces through the defense, sweeping away everything in its path. An exhausted Reito flies back and collapses to the ground under Kazuki's indifferent gaze. Kazuki remains completely calm, carefully assessing the difference in strength between the combatants. He coldly states that in pure spell speed, Raito had a chance, but her opponent is simply superior to her in everything. The defeated girl looks after him indignantly, reproaching him for his callousness and reminding him that he had stood up for her before. Kazuki just lazily throws over his shoulder that, in the current outcome, there is absolutely no need to interfere. Raito freezes in shock at such cold indifference from his ally. Meanwhile, the rival does not hide her triumph, looking down on her defeated opponent. She emphasizes the devastating power of her direct hit with a Tier 2 technique. But Raito doesn't even think about giving up. She is filled with stubbornness and a fierce desire to turn the tide of the battle. Enough and Hestel. All. And Min- has been referenced Owl Racer of while. Gritting her teeth and overcoming the pain, Raito refuses to give up. After all, magic remains her only weapon in which she must win. A bright flash surrounds her hands as the girl activates the spell at the limit of her abilities. A powerful stream of water erupts from her fingers, cutting through the air in a desperate attempt to turn the tide of the battle. The element collides with its rival's barrier, creating a wild whirlwind of spray and a deafening roar. As she falls onto the cold stone of the arena, she still whispers words of struggle, refusing to accept defeat. The exhausted body falls limply to the ground under the weight of a lost battle. The opponent stands triumphantly over the defeated one as the judges announce the final verdict. With his face buried in the floor, Raito realized with bitter despair the full depth of his collapse. Kazuki sits down next to him, discussing the harsh mechanics of this fight, where everything was decided by pure numbers and volume of force. The winner arrogantly throws out words about how her opponent initially had no chance and no natural talent. But Kazuki only silently shares this cruel diagnosis, acknowledging the obvious. Kazuki soberly assesses her shortcomings, clumsiness, a weak understanding of the very essence of magic, and modest results. However, even in this dark moment, he notices her main weapon, incredible blind persistence. The girl trained until she lost her pulse, overcoming herself day after day for the sake of this illusory chance. Kazuki gently stops his advancing opponent, bringing a grim conclusion to this unequal fight. His face lights up with a warm smile as he says a name full of deep meaning. Raito looks at him through a veil of tears, wiping his wet cheeks. Kazuki says this as an unbreakable vow, protecting the honor of the one he considers his ward. Tears stream from her eyes, mixed with the bitter realization of her own weakness. And her rival's cold voice continues to mercilessly finish her off with ridicule about her insignificant mana level. Kazuki carefully assesses the situation, calculating his chances in the upcoming confrontation. But the enemy only sneers contemptuously, not missing the chance to hurt his pride. Kazuki remains icy calm, although he is well aware of the absurdity of the situation. The opponent only waves her hand irritably, shifting the burden of the battle onto someone else's shoulders. Another spectacle-hungry fighter immediately appears, rubbing his hands in anticipation. Having thrown a cold remark to his partner, he rushes into battle faster than the air can cool. Kazuki carefully picks up the injured girl in his arms, carrying her away from the arena. They descend into the stands, and the confused girl looks at her savior with disbelief. She is amazed to find that the pain recedes and the debilitating fatigue disappears without a trace. Meanwhile, Kazuki mentally draws the boundaries of what is permitted, because fighting at full strength is impossible now. The rules are strict. Mana must be strictly limited, no elements or even spellcasting. He lightly touches his lips with his tongue, but the inner tension betrays his true feelings. Kusanagi Minato throws his hands up in joy, declaring that he will no longer hold back. The crowd in the stands roars with delight, cheering on the fighters and demanding a great show. Minato's Kusanagi erupts in flames, displaying a colossal power of 8,000 units of mana. Against the backdrop of this colossal power, Kazuki's tiny 100 units seem like a drop in the ocean, where any mistake is like death. Kazuki calmly awaits the attack, standing in front of his blazing opponent like a statue. Fiery circles of spells swirl around Kusanagi Minato, ready to crush all living things. A flash of blinding pain pierces the arena. Kusanagi Minato clutches his face with a scream. The audience froze in shock, not believing their eyes. Did it really all end so quickly? Victory goes to participant Kusanagi Minato. The opponent was defeated without a single sound, leaving everyone in complete stupor. Kazuki leaves the arena with a stony face, leaving behind his blue-haired opponent seething with rage. Raito can hardly find the words to express his admiration for this incredible and swift victory. Their eyes meet, and the tension between them is razor-sharp. It seems the rivals are ready to tear each other's throats apart. Shrouded in a powerful aura, the girl prepares for a serious fight, determined to prove her superiority. Meanwhile, the rules change at the most unexpected moment, making the stakes for this round as high as possible. The fate of the entire team now depends entirely on the outcome of this fight. The second duel is officially declared open. Magic circles flare up on both sides, but Kazuki's spell instantly dissipates without a trace. He only coldly notices his opponent's weak spot, not intending to waste his energy in vain. The water streams rush forward with a roar, but Kazuki doesn't even think about stopping. The girl realizes in horror that her most powerful attack cuts through nothing but empty air. The water shatters into pieces, and Kazuki continues to confidently close the distance under the surprised gaze of the stands. The blue-haired warrior is shocked to realize that her magic has proven completely useless. The spectators in the stands whispered enthusiastically, amazed that the winner didn't even get dirty. Kazuki continues to move with incredible ease, leaving his opponent completely bewildered. With each new evasion, the girl's confidence is replaced by panic and fear. Water dragons pierce the space one after another, but the target eludes again and again. The confused opponent frantically tries to understand how it is possible to fight without using magic at all. Trying to gain the upper hand, the girl discusses the logic of spells and the superiority of pure force. However, her confidence begins to crumble in the face of her opponent's absolute composure. The guy calmly analyzes the situation, realizing that such stunts require incredible courage. Leaving no time for reflection, she unleashes the full destructive power of the water element. The stands freeze in horror, realizing the scale of the third-rank threat. But the next moment, triumph gives way to shock. A crushing blow cuts through nothing but emptiness. A bright flash blinds the arena as magic collides with an unexpected obstacle. Kazuki suddenly appears right in front of her, unharmed and calm, as if nothing had happened. He easily explains the secret of his trick, demonstrating an artifact capable of absorbing energy flows. The arena froze in silence, staring at the giant rift in the ground that the boy's power had created. Raito looks at what is happening in complete stupor, not believing his own eyes. Suddenly, the tension gives way to an explosion of genuine laughter that spreads throughout the arena. Kazuki watches what is happening, not fully realizing the comical nature of the situation. The stands erupt in applause, declaring Kusanagi Minato the winner. An inspired Raito quickly approaches them, ready to celebrate his triumph. Kazuki shares this victory with his faithful comrade with a slight smile. She just nods shyly, overwhelmed with emotion after the intense fight. The rival retreats into the shadows, leaving them alone and promising not to interfere again. Kazuki casts an appraising glance after them, noting the strange change in the rules of the game. Assessing the aftermath of the battle, he smiles and notes that his opponent clearly held back her true power. Kazuki reflects thoughtfully on Yuika's rapid progress, which has seen an incredible leap in strength in just a few weeks. Raito fervently assures his sister of his determination to become powerful enough to protect her from any worries or dangers. However, in response, he hears only a skeptical grin, showing complete disbelief in such loud promises. Kazuki watches this scene from the side with genuine interest, noticing every detail of what is happening. Suddenly, the atmosphere around him changes, and Kazuki is alarmed by the surge of a completely alien, uncontrollable energy. The boy's face contorts in shock as he realizes the nature of this sinister force breaking through his protective contours. Everyone present freezes in stupor, turning their frightened glances to the source of the sudden indignation. Meanwhile, in Kusanagi's empty classroom, Minato and his comrade are unceremoniously rummaging through other people's things, taking advantage of the fact that everyone is distracted by the duel. But instead of valuables, they come across only stacks of neatly folded textbooks and are amazed at the owner's meticulousness. Kusanagi Minato grits his teeth in displeasure, racking his brain over what secrets this excellent student possessed that allowed him to reach such heights. Suddenly, the comrade freezes in place, noticing something so frightening in the window that it takes his breath away. Kusanagi Minato's gaze turns to the panoramic glass, and his pupils narrow at the terrifying sight. Outside the window, the familiar landscape of the academy is drowning in an ominous crimson haze that has painted the skies in the colors of inevitable disaster. The students panic as they realize the scale of the impending nightmare, refusing to believe that what is happening is real. Kazuki is overcome with a chilling horror. Is that same terrible prophecy really starting to come true again here and now? Thoughts race through the boy's head, drawing terrifying parallels with the tragic past of this cursed place. The space around begins to crack at the seams, ejecting nightmarish creatures of chaos from gaping portals. Monstrous creatures burst out with a terrifying roar, sowing panic among the defenseless students. The ensuing panic instantly spreads throughout the academy, turning the classroom corridors into a deadly danger zone. Flashes of destructive energy shatter the silence, reducing the elite educational institution to rubble before the eyes of its shocked students. The students' faces are distorted with pure horror because they still don't understand how to survive this sudden nightmare. But Kazuki maintains a cool head, urging his comrades not to panic and to move towards the gym in an organized manner. He gives instructions to his classmates, but his own next move leaves his friends frozen in alarm. One of the students looks at the boy doubtfully, trying to understand why he refuses to hide with everyone else. Kusanagi Minato is immediately at his side, trying to lighten the mood with his ever-present, light-hearted smile. One of the frightened teachers begs the boys not to do anything crazy and not to try to play heroes, but Kazuki just shrugs his shoulders nonchalantly, as if what was happening was just an annoying morning warm-up. Reito looks at him with hidden pain and anxiety, desperately hoping for his comrade's prudence. Her voice trembles with fear as she begs him not to risk his own life needlessly. Meanwhile, Kusanagi Minato is already rushing forward, succumbing to the excitement of the impending danger. He challenges time itself, declaring that running the 100-meter dash in such conditions will not be difficult. Kazuki instantly activates spatial magic, leaving his overconfident friend far behind. The seniors rush forward, trying to clear the way for the rest of the retreating students. Kusanagi Minato can barely keep up with his comrades' incredible pace, feeling the adrenaline rush through his blood. He encourages Kazuki to give it his all, sincerely believing that together they can save absolutely everyone. Kazuki's scanning abilities assess the overall concentration of hostile energy within the academy building, drawing a grim threat map. The situation is complicated by the fact that not all students have the gift of self-defense in a critical moment. Having assessed the situation, Kazuki decides to act preemptively and quickly leaves the safety of his hiding place. Monstrous monsters are already breaking down classroom doors, driving defenseless students into a deadly trap, but Kazuki is ready to take on this fight. Kazuki bursts out of the doorway into the heart of chaos with lightning speed, releasing blinding, magical energy. A powerful energy blast knocks the monster aside, giving the terrified students a moment of saving respite. Instant reaction and cold calculation, Kazuki stops the creature's attack in a single move, demonstrating incomprehensible skill. A nightmare rages around him, but amidst this madness, the young man maintains an icy calm, towering over his fallen enemies. The situation escalates to the limit, and Kazuki firmly declares that he will leave the evacuation of his partner under his personal responsibility. He throws a warning after his comrade, but he's already disappeared from sight, dissolving into the scarlet haze of the corridor. However, Kazuki's speed of movement exceeds all expectations, leaving behind only the whistle of cutting air. Left behind, the boy is annoyed to realize his own helplessness in this rapid massacre. Thoughts of the futility of one's own role lie like a heavy stone on one's shoulders as reality around one continues to collapse. After all, the ease with which Kazuki deals with an entire armada of monsters in a matter of seconds is astounding. The prudent Kazuki instantly calculates the risks. Brute force in the cramped school corridors could harm the survivors. Therefore, he chooses the tactics of low-power precision strikes, methodically clearing the way step by step. Flashes of magic illuminate the dark corridors as Kazuki continues to protect the surviving students from new waves of creatures. Amidst the destruction and roar of battle, Kazuki covers the backs of defenseless schoolchildren, preventing the monsters from breaking through any further. Another threat turns to dust under the onslaught of spells, but there is catastrophically little time for a respite. Panic among the students reaches its peak as they frantically try to make sense of the nightmare that is unfolding. In the midst of the battle, Kazuki confidently holds the line, urging the others not to panic and to follow the rescue plan. An unexpected cry makes everyone freeze and turn their frightened gaze to the sky. An unknown green magic picks up the frightened schoolchildren, lifting them straight into the air before the eyes of the astonished boy. Kusanagi Minato demonstrates an absolutely incredible level of strength, leaving his comrades completely dumbfounded by what they saw. Kazuki turns sharply at the noise, instantly assessing the situation. The girl freezes in panic, feeling the ground slipping out from under her feet. From the darkness of the corridor, a monstrous, multi-headed creature approaches her, emitting a deadly aura. Her legs give way from horror, and the unfortunate woman collapses onto the cold floor. She starts screaming, begging for help in a pitch-black nightmare. Panic fear paralyzes the body, preventing one from taking a single step. Every breath is difficult, and a voice breaks into a heart-rending screech. At this critical moment, a blinding golden flash of magic erupts. The girl opens her eyes in amazement, not believing her salvation. Terrible images from the past, when everything hung by a thread, come to her mind. Kazuki quickly appears next to her, shielding the frightened student. She looks at him with awe and hidden trepidation. The guy casually waves his hand, showing with his whole appearance that there was no reason to turn around. He extends his hand, helping her to her feet. The girl lowers her gaze in embarrassment, realizing the piquancy of the moment. It is difficult for her to hide her shyness after the shock she has experienced. Meanwhile, Ryder runs past the stairs with a cheerful cry, hurrying to help the others. The girl watches him go, jokingly wondering who this restless guy will save next. Kazuki doesn't waste any time and confidently shows her the escape route. She tries to call out to him, but the guy is already resolutely rushing towards a new danger. She looks at what is happening with alarm, clasping her hands in hope for a miracle. Meanwhile, Kazuki quickly overcomes obstacles without wasting a second. The academy building instantly finds itself at the epicenter of an inexplicable nightmare. The country's top leadership is panicking as it tries to comprehend the scale of the impending disaster. The conference room erupts into a frantic hubbub as officials demand immediate answers. The president is struggling to maintain control of the situation and is giving orders to emergency services. However, his subordinates immediately confront him with the harsh reality. There are practically no trained combat mages left in the country. The politician's face turns pale from the realization of the bitter truth. The long-standing, fragile peace turned out to be just an illusion, and the military budget was directed towards completely different goals. The slam of a fist on the table sounds like a verdict on the entire peaceful era. The old man realizes with horror that history from 50 years ago is repeating itself. In the patrol car, the police officers anxiously discuss the rapidly unfolding nightmare. They realize that the long-awaited peace has collapsed in an instant. Police Inspector Shido Shugo maintains a frightening composure in the face of threat. Police Officer Sanada Karin looks at her partner with genuine amazement. A column of special vehicles with sirens blaring rushes through the night city to the breakthrough site. Reporters from helicopters broadcast terrible news from the Academy of Divine Magic. The crimson sky is torn apart by the screams of monsters that fill the entire territory of the Academy. In the shelter, frightened students and teachers try to coordinate their actions via live broadcast. On the front lines, Kusanagi Minato and other gifted students join forces to fight back against the first wave of monsters. Panic grips the streets as ordinary passers-by realize with horror the scale of the disaster. Monstrous creatures descend upon the city, forcing people to flee in panic from imminent death. Observers in their shelters freeze in front of their screens, not believing their eyes. A blood-red sky hangs over the crumbling metropolis, foreshadowing the worst. Even those who were far from the epicenter are now watching the horrific broadcasts with horror. Civilians freeze in front of their television screens, feeling a chilling fear. Meanwhile, Kazuki quickly moves around the academy grounds, assessing the situation. The clash with the horde continues, but the enemy pressure only intensifies. Kazuki holds the line, understanding the precariousness of their situation. Every moment counts, and gifted students are forced to push themselves to the limit. Raito coordinates the evacuation, pulling victims out of the most dangerous areas. Kazuki rushes to new hotspots of breakthrough, not allowing panic to take over. Kusanagi Minato unleashes a barrage of flames on his enemies, attempting to hold back their advance. But the forces are running out, and the desperate fire of Kusanagi Minato no longer stops the monsters. A nightmarish guardian, emitting a deadly aura, appears before the terrified students. Kusanagi Minato's comrades stood frozen in horror in the face of superior force. Kusanagi Minato himself breaks into a cry of despair, not understanding why his magic is powerless. Inside him, a merciless verdict sounds. It's all about his weakness. The firestorm sends Minato's Kusanagi flying backwards, leaving him lying helpless on the ground. Kyo cases. The dust settles, and the three comrades come to their senses after the destructive force of the explosion. Kazuki stands proudly among the ruins, displaying incredible strength that takes your breath away. But instead of triumph, his face only shows cold indifference to his defeated enemies. Kusanagi Minato rises from his knees, overcome by a burning feeling of humiliation and disbelief. He can't come to terms with the bitter truth. The one he despised saved his life again. Anger and confusion fill Kusanagi Minato as his gaze is fixed on the imperturbable Kazuki. "You must hate me," Kusanagi Minato shouts, demanding an answer from fate. But Kazuki's response is frighteningly calm. Shattering his pride, he helped simply because he could. These words echo in Kusanagi Minato's mind, causing him to shudder with helplessness. Kazuki continues to speak quietly and evenly, but every word he says hits harder than any spell. Unable to contain his emotions, Kusanagi Minato charges forward, driven by blind rage. His voice trembles with hysteria as he recalls the past. Kazuki was always a talentless loser? Kusanagi Minato cries out in despair about how unfair this world is, but Kazuki only looks at him indifferently. I was reborn, Kazuki says, as if that explains everything. Kusanagi Minato furiously denies the obvious, demanding to know why all his superiority has crumbled to dust. Kazuki looks down at him coldly, as if he were a capricious child. He speaks mercilessly about the nature of weakness that leads the weak to oppress others. With just his aura, Kazuki puts pressure on his opponent, making them not even think about resisting. Kusanagi Minato collapses to his knees, completely crushed by Kazuki's mental and physical might. Defeated and devastated, he finally realizes the true cause of his fear, which has its roots deep in the past. Having hidden behind the backs of others for too long, he bitterly recalls how he himself once needed protection. Then his world collapsed, and desperate fear gripped his body, forcing him to cling to anyone who was stronger. Now the comrades look at each other with alarm, realizing the full depth of the other's fall and the irreversibility of the changes. The lone figure on its knees represents absolute defeat, where pride is trampled into dust. Unable to contain his emotions, the boy gives free rein to tears, pouring out pent-up pain and a burning feeling of worthlessness. Suddenly, memories snatch from the darkness a terrible image of creatures of darkness, bringing death. Monstrous wings cover the sky, bringing primal terror to everyone around. Enormous monsters descend upon the earth, ready to tear apart anyone who dares to stand in their way. The sinister creatures demonstrate their monstrous power, leaving no hope of salvation. But at this critical moment, Kazuki calmly activates a protective seal, blocking the enemy's path. A bright flash of magic cuts through the darkness, throwing the enemy back with a powerful counterattack. The monster roars in rage, but the adamant Kazuki continues to hold the barrier. Like a steel wall, the magic shield reflects any attacks of the enraged beast. Having finished the fight, Kazuki stands proudly amidst the smoke and destruction, radiating unwavering confidence. However, the situation is escalating with each passing second. The number of guards who have broken through is steadily increasing. Assessing the scale of the threat, Kazuki remains icy calm and urges his allies not to panic. Meanwhile, rage boils in the hearts of other fighters, ready to rush into battle. A warrior with a bestial grin summons combat power by activating his own magic circle. At the other end of the arena, mortal danger befalls a defenseless student surrounded by ferocious creatures. But at the crucial moment, help arrives, and a powerful counterattack displaces the monsters to the sides, saving the girl from certain death. There are hordes of monsters, but the brave student is determined to protect his comrades until the very end. Frightened students gather around him, ready to follow their impromptu leader. However, the scale of the invasion exceeds all expectations, and the situation quickly spirals out of control. At this critical moment, Kazuki suddenly appears from the shadows, offering his laconic help. His sudden appearance takes his comrade by surprise, causing him to recoil in fear. Kazuki looks coldly around the battlefield, assessing the threat with Olympian calm. Faced with such a mad horde, the defender immediately soberly assesses his chances of survival. But while they are thinking about escape, Kazuki is already moving from words to devastating actions. A thunderous strike falls with lightning speed on enemy positions, erasing obstacles in its path. Kazuki's magical barrier instantly sends the monsters fleeing without a single wasted movement. The students stand frozen in absolute stupor, unable to believe their eyes after such a stunning display of power. Kazuki, however, indifferently gives a short order to leave, returning to his own secret mission. Inspired, his comrades quickly leave the danger zone, and Kazuki plans to penetrate into the very heart of the destroyed building. Meanwhile, in another part of the arena, a squad of magicians is using their last strength to hold back the furious onslaught of monsters. Amidst the chaos and destruction, Reito finds himself on the verge of exhaustion, breathing heavily from the strain. At this moment, someone who knows how to lend a hand in moments of weakness comes to the rescue. But instead of words of support, Reito hears only a cold and stern reminder of the harsh reality. Overcoming the pain, Reito quickly returns to action, realizing that there is no time to rest. A complex mixture of anxiety and unspoken recognition appears on the companion's face. "Oh, Senpai." The tension mounts with each passing second as defensive barriers begin to crumble under the enemy's onslaught. At this critical moment, Reito rushes to the rescue, leading his surviving comrades out of the destruction zone. "My breathing is ragged, my strength is running out, but there is nowhere to retreat." Reito's sobering question makes him freeze. Could it really be that Kusanagi Minato remained there, in the very epicenter of the nightmare? But his comrade is quick to dispel his fears, assuring him that Kusanagi Minato's rebellious spirit and his colossal mana reserves will not let him perish. Raito listens to these words, pressing his hand to his chest, trying to calm his frantic heartbeat. The words sound inspiring, making one believe that even in this pitch darkness, victory is still possible. Raito enthusiastically takes up this impulse, extending his hand towards hope. But a sudden outbreak of chaos instantly shatters the fragile illusion of security. Horror paralyzes people as cries of despair echo throughout the area. A piercing order is heard to immediately seek shelter before it is too late. A huge shadow looms over them, threatening to crush anyone in its path. The situation is getting out of control, and escape is the only chance to survive. Monstrous giants obscure the crimson sky, sowing deadly flames around. A sharp jerk saves from certain death, forcing the group to rush about in search of salvation. One of the survivors casts a horrified glance back, assessing the scale of the impending disaster. The monster deals a crushing blow, but the barrier heroically takes the terrible attack. The skies open with even greater threats, but reinforcements suddenly arrive on the battlefield. The magical seals flare up with renewed vigor, revealing to the world a determined squad of fighters. Arriving specialists immediately take control of the situation, prioritizing saving lives. The energetic Reito is ready to join the fight, reminding confused adults of her true calling. The girl's eyes show unwavering determination. Before them are not just citizens, but gifted magicians. The squad leader tries to redirect their forces to rear positions, desperately trying to maintain fragile control. His voice rings with the bitter truth about the personnel shortage, which has to be hidden from the public. Meanwhile, first aid is being given to the wounded, and the atmosphere around them gradually clears. Kazuki watches silently as the police cars arrive, preferring to leave the incident to them. However, sober reason tells him that conventional forces react too slowly to large-scale threats. The guy looks with disdain at the sluggish state machine, rotten in its bureaucracy. But there is no time to think for long. Duty calls Kazuki to the front lines to help the remaining students in danger. The dispatcher at headquarters is horrified to realize that the number of monsters is growing exponentially. The regular police are clearly unable to cope with the influx of creatures, and all hopes are now pinned on the elite. Everywhere in the country, people were glued to their screens, anxiously awaiting the intervention of the renowned magical aristocracy. Panic grips even the older generation, who watch the unfolding chaos with horror. The operator's voice breaks into a scream, pleading for immediate reinforcement. The heavy door swings open, revealing a gloomy figure lost in his own thoughts. The faithful butler tries to warn his master, reminding him that the minor threat can be dealt with without them. But the owner of the castle is adamant and decisively ignores the servant's persuasions. A muffled order is given to retire, which does not tolerate any objections. The devoted butler immediately falls silent, humbly accepting his master's will. Meanwhile, Kusanagi Minato activates the shining seal, realizing that the situation is getting tense. Panic grows with each passing second as the hordes of monsters draw ever closer, thwarting any attempts to hold back the onslaught. The speed with which the enemy breaks through the defenses exceeds all dire forecasts. The irony of fate strikes hard. Where is the vaunted magical aristocracy when support is needed most? The students desperately try to fight back, dousing the creatures with streams of elemental magic, but it is clearly not enough. The monsters are coming in an endless stream, and the thought of what awaits them ahead chills the blood. At this moment, they emerge from the depths of the crimson haze, the true masters of this nightmare. The atmosphere around thickens to the point of physical pain, sparking with deadly purple energy. In the face of impending doom, even the bravest are speechless, feeling their own insignificance. Raito's eyes widen in horror. Could it be that their opponent was a real greater demon? With trepidation in their voices, the comrades remind us such creatures are an ancient nightmare that only the true elite can overcome. To fight them, a spell of at least the 5th rank is required, but there is simply no one here capable of such a miracle. The space around flares up with crimson flame, signifying a fatal blow. Raito's face turns pale as he realizes the inevitability of disaster. But at the critical moment, instincts take over. Raito rushes forward, outpacing the deadly wave. At the last moment, he shields his comrade, taking all the destructive power on himself. A powerful explosion splits the air, throwing the defenders aside. The firestorm subsides, leaving behind only smoke and ash. Raito rises to his feet, not believing his eyes. Raito's gaze freezes on the fallen figure, and his insides tighten with a terrible premonition. Good is the old started. Madness reigns all around, the world is collapsing in fiery chaos, and frightened people are falling one after another under the onslaught of an unknown force. Raito clutches the bloody body to himself with all his might, begging for help in the midst of this utter nightmare. Someone tries to protect themselves with magic, panicking and calling for salvation on the edge of the abyss. Kusanagi Minato stretches her hands forward in despair, begging for mercy. The survivors look in horror at their own hands and the crumbling world, realizing their impending doom. Tears fill his eyes as Raito desperately prays for a miracle from someone who can fix everything. Pain tears the heart apart, and a cry of despair escapes the lips. A monstrous figure rises amidst the flames, radiating primal malice. The monster fills the ruins with a victorious roar, revealing countless greedy eyes. The huge creature absorbs this horror, enjoying the spectacle of complete destruction. A heavy tread interrupts this nightmare as the one least expected to be here appears from the smoke. Kazuki calmly steps forward, breaking the oppressive silence. He only utters a quiet apology for being late, looking at the destroyed world. Raito couldn't believe his eyes, frozen in shock by his comrade's sudden appearance. Unbearable pain breaks out through tears as Raito frantically calls out for someone close to him. Kazuki kneels down next to her, looking into the eyes of her grief-stricken friend. His hand gently touches the lifeless face, as if trying to bring back the warmth. Raito looks away with a bitter pain in his chest, unable to look at the motionless body. Raito's gaze freezes on the fallen figure, and his insides tighten with a terrible premonition. Shock paralyzes Raito as a terrifying thought dawns on him. Could this really be Kusanagi Minato? A confident Kazuki declares that he intends to deal with all of this personally. Raito listens to him with a mixture of fear and disbelief, unsure how to react to such reckless bravado. Around them stretches a battlefield, strewn with the bodies of fallen comrades, over which mysterious magical spheres flare up. Raito stands frozen in confusion amidst the chaos, unable to tear his eyes away from the blinding flashes of light. Touching his wounded ally, Kazuki is surprised to see how the severe injuries begin to heal instantly. A blinding light fills everything around, causing Raito to hold his breath at the sight that unfolds. The remaining survivors look on in amazement at the miracle that is happening, not understanding the source of this incredible energy. A casual observer will be horrified to recognize the rarest sacred magic of the highest order, which no one present possessed. Exhausted, Kazuki falls to the ground, trying to comprehend how he managed to do the impossible. They frantically try to figure out where this blinding light is coming from, but there is still no answer. One of the fighters desperately rushes into battle, declaring that duty comes first and civilians must be protected at any cost. His comrades try to bring him back to his senses, reminding him that reckless heroism will only lead to certain death. Some look at their wounds with horror, realizing the hopelessness of their situation. The whole city is gripped by panic, and news from the front spreads like a death sentence. The police are defeated. Despair overwhelms the survivors, as they are driven into a corner and have no way to find salvation. Monstrous monsters continue to advance, revealing their terrifying power to the world. The media, horrified, broadcast footage of the disaster, realizing that this is the end for the entire familiar world. People across the country are watching the broadcast with bated breath, realizing that there is no hope left. Against the backdrop of burning ruins, Kazuki calmly steps forward, ready to challenge the inevitable. One of the survivors shouts after him, desperately trying to stop the madman from making a fatal mistake. Kazuki fearlessly approaches the source of the deadly threat, surrounded by flying sparks of flame. A nightmarish creature of chaos, shrouded in an ominous purple aura, rises up right in front of him. The guy casts a cold glance at the insolent monster, as if not noticing the impending danger. The monster peers at him with its many evil eyes, anticipating a bloody massacre. Only one insane and bloodthirsty word escapes from the monster's mouth, echoing in the void. The monster's murderous intent grows, filling the minds of those around it with unbearable horror. The spectators of this massacre, driven mad by fear, huddle together in a silent plea for salvation. The other survivors freeze in panic, watching the nightmare with bated breath. But Kazuki remains chillingly calm, raising his hand with the glowing magical symbol. His voice is quiet but commanding, cutting off the monastic's insane scream at the very mid-note. A powerful blow of magical resonance causes the monster to shudder in pain and release a deafening roar from its mouth. Kazuki muses to himself that although such disasters are commonplace, it is better to nip panic among people in the bud. Suddenly, a terrifying blow strikes the target. One of the comrades is wounded, and panic again overwhelms the survivors. Destructive magic rages all around, and deadly waves sweep over the very heads of the frightened students. However, Kazuki doesn't hesitate for a second, instantly erecting a shining protective barrier to repel the attack. The remnants of self-control give way to panic, and people scream in horror, not understanding where this monstrous power came from. Reporters frantically try to point their cameras at the epicenter of events, reporting from the front lines. Even amidst the chaos, the cameraman is shocked to realize that he is facing monsters just like an ordinary guy. Leto appears on camera with glowing magic in her hand, confident in her powers and ready to fight. An ominous silence falls as the students realize they are witnessing an unequal battle to the death. The monster's fury floods the entire space, causing everyone present to shudder with primal horror. Kazuki maintains an icy calm, casting an ironic glance at what is happening around him. A powerful magical barrier erupts in the monster's path, absorbing the crushing blow. The monster lets out a maddening, deafening roar that makes your blood run cold. Panic grips the high school students. The sixth tier of magic seems like a death sentence against which even time itself is powerless. The students' faces are distorted with despair. They huddle together in anticipation of the inevitable end. The rest of the students stand frozen in horror, not daring to breathe. At this critical moment, teammates instinctively huddle together in a tight circle, seeking salvation. Kazuki fearlessly shields his confused comrades, spreading his arms in a protective gesture. Amidst the general chaos, a cry paralyzed by fear freezes, ready to burst from whitened lips. Raito convulsively hugs his companion, whispering a prayer to higher powers for protection. Despair overwhelms the defenders, because resisting such an insane force seems like madness. But at that moment, Raito clenches his fists, firmly believing in his comrade's victory. The fighter's silhouette stands out clearly against the crimson sky, radiating unwavering determination. Kazuki coldly assesses the situation, noticing every flaw in the actions of the arrogant enemy. With a sharp wave of his hand, he seizes the initiative, showing that his own rank is far from the limit. Amidst the general confusion, panicked whispers of an incredible synthesis of the elements are heard. The monster choked on its own anger, spewing curses and impotent rage. Kazuki makes a confident lunge, ending this short and deadly fight. The smoke clears, leaving the solitary figure of the victor against the fading crimson glow. Kazuki breathes heavily, looking around the battlefield where unimaginable power had just raged. The energy trail begins to rapidly dissolve into the air, revealing the frightening silence of the empty space. The majestic towers of the academy rise serenely under the clear sky, as if nothing had happened. Kazuki's face shows slight surprise, mixed with cold satisfaction from the quickly achieved victory. A deafening silence falls as the surviving students struggle to believe their eyes. Suddenly, the square explodes with deafening cries of joy and jubilation. A deafening wave of triumph rolls through the ranks as the enormity of what has happened dawns on everyone. Tears of relief wash away the fear from the faces of those who, just a moment ago, were prepared for the worst. Kazuki accepts the thanks with unwavering calm, though the tension in the air is still palpable. One of the observers can barely stand on his feet from the shock he experienced, feeling his knees weaken. Raito approaches his injured comrades, radiating confidence and a willingness to help. Yuika looks at her savior with tear-filled eyes, filled with sincere gratitude. Kazuki smiles warmly in response, completing all the necessary healing work. A wave of universal admiration overwhelms the heroes, demanding their attention. The crowd's enthusiastic cheers never cease, turning the day's heroes into the academy's main idols. Rumors spread like wildfire, leaving the entire class buzzing with the unexpected news of the transfer. There is such a noise around the desk that it becomes simply impossible to concentrate on studying. His classmates bombard the boy with questions, trying to unravel the secret of his incredible strength. Someone frowns skeptically, refusing to believe in the triumph of a simple student and trying to hide their envy. The squabble escalates as Kazuki tries to escape the attention without being noticed. Kazuki sighs heavily, trying to digest the attention that has fallen on him and the awkwardness of the situation. Raito immediately teases his friend, sarcastically noting that he is clearly in trouble. Kazuki just brushes off the jokes, reminding everyone of his newfound star status. Leto continues to tease the boy, reminding him of his heroic deeds in the recent disaster. Kazuki maintains an unperturbed expression, although Leto is already becoming embarrassed by his own words. The guide changes the subject and asks how the recovery from the nightmare is going. The girl confirms that everything is fine and they have become close again after what they experienced. She thanks the guy with sincere warmth for being there at a critical moment. Unable to bear the excessive sentimentality, Kazuki gives her a light slap on the back of the head. Raito immediately clutches his head, indignantly declaring that gratitude can be expressed without physical violence. But then she shyly straightens her hair, hiding a shy smile. Meanwhile, in high offices, completely different passions are raging, and officials are hastily concluding an emergency meeting. The head of the committee gives his final orders, trying to assess the scale of the chaos that has been created. High-ranking officials still cannot believe that a simple student managed to crush a powerful boss. However, the orders have been given, the elite magical aristocracy is hastily sent home, and the authorities are preparing for a new threat. At this moment, Kusanagi Minato and his companions appear on the training ground. Kazuki and Leto notice their approach and freeze tensely, sensing something is wrong. Kusanagi Minato casts an appraising glance at the boys, maintaining unwavering confidence. Suddenly, the proud aristocrat changes her tone and turns to Kusanagi Minato with an unexpected request. She resolutely declares her intention to become Kusanagi Minato's student at all costs. The tension in the air could have been cut with a knife as the two girls sat on a bench beneath the traditional sliding doors. Yuika nervously tugged at the cuffs of her uniform, feeling the heavy, piercing gaze of her interlocutor on her. The conversation turns to the recent nightmare, and the mention of a massive cataclysm makes the girls freeze in horror. Memories of Kusanagi Minato's incredible power, capable of effortlessly crushing high-ranking demons, still evoke awe. Even the very realization that someone possesses fourth-tier magic seems like absolute madness and an unattainable peak to them. But facts remain facts, and there is no longer any point in denying the obvious shock. A deep sigh betrays an internal struggle, as admitting someone else's superiority turns out to be surprisingly difficult. The conversation turns more personal, revealing old grievances and unspoken reproaches. The rigid principles of the past are questioned, forcing one to reconsider one's views on one's own path. Unable to bear the pressure of emotions, Yuika abruptly rises to her feet, trying to hide the trembling in her voice. Her words sound like a desperate vow to protect those dear to her at any cost. Hearing this, the elder one freezes, amazed by the younger one's sudden determination. The previous severity is replaced by a warm, almost maternal recognition of the changes in Yuika's character. A relieved smile lights up the girl's face, finally lifting the weight off her soul. However, the shadow of Minato's former pride and envy of Kusanagi's strength still echoes bitterly in his thoughts. Suddenly, the proud aristocrat changes her tone and turns to Kusanagi Minato with an unexpected request. She realizes the vast gap between their powers, realizing that she is stuck at the level of an advanced mage. Her past arrogance now seems stupid and inappropriate to her, causing only sincere remorse. Through shame and pride comes a plea for guidance, full of desperate determination. She resolutely declares her intention to become Kusanagi Minato's student at all costs. Kazuki suddenly agrees to her request with a slight nonchalance. She is at a loss for words when she hears this answer, since she was so harsh towards him just recently. But the guy just shrugs. Since she asked, he generously forgives and accepts her. The girls' faces show absolute incomprehension of what is happening. Right then, Raito runs up, shouting out a similar request as he goes, and declaring that there is no difference. The two of them stand frozen in complete amazement at such a lightness of being. Meanwhile, Raito is already hugging Kazuki in a familiar way, leaving him no chance to refuse. The situation changes dramatically when Kazuki and his companion find themselves in a formal setting. Sonata Karen and her colleague sit nearby, displaying their official insignia. They bow their heads in deep respect, acknowledging that without the boys' help they would all be doomed. Kazuki, however, remains unperturbed, stopping their outpouring of gratitude and demanding that they get down to business. Investigators confirm the completion of the official investigation, but immediately move on to hidden questions. The investigator looks closely at Kazuki, noting the oddities in his recent awakening of magic. He emphasizes that the accident seemed to erase the guy's previous personality, completely rewriting his nature. Kazuki listens to these accusations with a cold, inscrutable expression on his face. The investigator continues to press, hinting at the incredible power that allowed him to deal with the demon. Raito is the first to lose her temper and abruptly interrupts the investigator, demanding that he stop this farce. The investigator only smiles slyly, instantly changing his interrogation tactics. He utters a name that could turn the entire investigation upside down, the Mage in Black. This mysterious nickname makes Kazuki and Leto freeze in a sense of foreboding. Images of an elusive hero protecting people in the shadows of night streets flash across the smartphone screen. Investigators are carefully examining the evidence, realizing that the net is tightening. Raito frowned in confusion, trying to understand what the investigators were getting at, but the interlocutor only smiles mysteriously, noticing the suspicious similarity. Even the age and build of the mysterious Avenger are eerily similar to those of the suspect. The investigation is taking a new turn, as the unauthorized use of magic is a serious crime. The police are aware of the seriousness of the situation, because the resonance of these antics is too great. But for the Academy students, such accusations could spell disaster. Students are warned of the consequences, offering a full confession in exchange for leniency. And then the tension reaches its peak when the investigator asks the main question directly. Kazuki remains icy calm under the heavy gaze, but the investigators are already confident that they are right and are not going to back down. Inner torment haunts those who are forced to conceal this secret. The difficult choice between duty and gratitude for salvation falls heavily on the shoulders of the witnesses. Meanwhile, within the walls of the academy, a new chapter begins for the arriving students. Kazuki and Leito have been attracting everyone's attention with their recent exploits. Enthusiastic classmates bombard the newcomers with questions about the secrets of the magical elite. Raito shyly tries to dodge the barrage of curious glances, but the noisy fun is interrupted by the appearance of the teacher. The lesson begins, but tension hangs in the air, foreshadowing new storms. Kazuki sighs heavily, once again realizing why he is so desperately trying not to attract unnecessary attention to himself. Suddenly, a call makes him turn around, and a slight look of surprise crosses the guy's face. A blushing classmate stands in front of him, timidly and embarrassedly asking him to spare her just a couple of minutes. Kazuki frowned in confusion, wondering since when secret conversations on the roof had become a common occurrence. Meanwhile, Raito is hiding behind the corner of the roof, watching what is happening in horror and trying to figure out how his friend got there in the first place. And most importantly, what wind brought Kazuki himself to this very roof, and in the company of some girl no less? The embarrassed girl shifts uncertainly from foot to foot, timidly asking if he even recognizes her. Kazuki blinks slightly in confusion, but the next second, fragments of recent events come flooding back to his memory. A flash of memory takes him back to that very dangerous lesson when the students were attacked by enraged magical beasts. At that critical moment, it was he who was there, protecting his frightened classmate from the impending threat. The girl looks at him with trepidation, haltingly thanking her savior for pulling her out of trouble twice. Kazuki just waves it off, trying to hide his embarrassment and assuring that he simply did what he had to. And in the eyes of the girl in love, at that moment, he sits as nothing less than an absolute hero. Meanwhile, Raito, from his hiding place, barely holds back his panic, trying to hear at least a word through the howling wind. Suddenly, the confession sounds so loud and clear that the hearts of the unwitting witness couple hiding nearby almost stop. Raito is almost speechless from shock, realizing that a real romantic confession is unfolding right before their eyes. Kazuki maintains a calm demeanor, listening attentively to the unexpected outpouring of feelings. The girl folds her hands in supplication, promising to make every effort if only he would agree to give her a chance. She looks into his eyes with hope, her heart sinking as she utters her cherished request to become her boyfriend. Kazuki smiles softly, responding to this sincere confession with unexpected warmth. However, Kazuki responds with a gentle refusal, citing the fact that he currently has completely different priorities. The girl lowers her head for a moment, hiding the fleeting shadow of disappointment, but then she gathers her strength, and, with a radiant smile, replies that she completely accepts his decision. Left alone, she does not hide her bitter annoyance, watching the unapproachable guy. At that very moment, Raito appears from around the corner with a frightened face. She awkwardly tries to justify herself, but Kazuki coldly notices her radiating magical aura. Raito sheepishly explains herself to him, clearly taken by surprise. But changing the subject, she pounces on the guy with childish curiosity and asks questions. Kazuki remains adamant, stating that romance is not in his plans right now. He adds philosophically that the gap between them is much deeper than it seems at first glance. Raito just blinked his eyes in confusion, trying to digest his cryptic words. Kazuki glances at her briefly, noticing her sighing heavily in frustration. She watches him go with a disappointed look, wondering what's really going on in his head. The guy turns over his shoulder, throwing a parting glance as he goes. Raito freezes in place under that piercing gaze, feeling completely vulnerable. But Kazuki suddenly softens and gives her friendly advice about controlling magic. Raito touches his neck sheepishly, trying to pretend that everything is under control. However, a fire of determination ignites within her to become stronger and finally achieve his recognition. Meanwhile, a completely different drama unfolds on the city's night streets as Kazuki faces new consequences from the recent disaster. Wait, and Monner and sensation pays. The hooded stranger finds himself trapped, but the bully's attack only elicits a cold grin from him. An instant reaction and the magician seizes the initiative, demonstrating a terrifying superiority. The bully doesn't even have time to realize the danger before a powerful impulse of magic throws him back. Kazuki closes the distance with lightning speed, leaving the enemy no chance to defend himself. A precise blow from the magic seal knocks the insolent man to the ground, accompanied by his own muffled cry. While the defeated enemy is recovering, the mysterious magician is already coldly assessing the situation. The frightened girl, in horror, recognizes in the secretive fighter that same elusive protector. She tries to call out to him, but the Night Avenger is already dissolving in streams of biblical energy. Under the shining moon, the magician quickly escapes pursuit, realizing the ambiguity of his new fame. Meanwhile, a completely different atmosphere reigns on the school rooftop as friends spend a carefree time at lunch. Kazuki continues the conversation enthusiastically, although the recent rumors have clearly affected his personal interests. Kusanagi Minato adds fuel to the fire by mentioning the heated discussions about the mysterious mage online. Kazuki himself freezes in complete bewilderment, having heard such unexpected details about himself. His comrades are simply amazed at how far removed their brilliant friend is from simple worldly joys. Reito explains that in the digital age, information spreads instantly thanks to smartphones and cameras. Those around him watch in amazement as Kazuki picks up a modern gadget for the first time in his life. The unexpected success exceeds all expectations. The screen comes to life, opening a portal to a vast digital world. The friends are genuinely happy about Kazuki's small victory, who studies the strange technology with amazement. But there is no time to relax, because Reito rightly reminds him of the promise he made earlier to hold the long-awaited training session. Kazuki readily accepts the challenge, offering to consolidate their success immediately after the end of classes. Reito looks at the gloomy Kazuki with apprehension, feeling a bad feeling grip his heart. The comrades are defeated in a matter of seconds, helplessly sprawled on the stone slab. Kazuki didn't even blink, coldly declaring that this was just a warm-up for the real test. Overcoming the pain, the allies rise to their feet and rush into the attack with redoubled fury. Kazuki only smiles encouragingly, seeing their unbroken fighting spirit. The magic circles flare up with renewed vigor, filling the air with thick spell energy. Meanwhile, a completely different drama is unfolding in the vicinity of Tokyo Tower. Observers stand frozen in horror at the fence, unable to believe their eyes. Panic grips people as they try to comprehend the scale of the impending disaster. From the darkness of the ruins rises a terrifying army of monsters thirsting for blood. And, on the training ground, exhausted comrades can barely stand on their feet after the crushing onslaught. Kazuki challenges them with a slight grin, demanding that they show everything they can do. But the furious stream of water crashes against Kazuki's impenetrable shield, leaving no trace. A powerful blow hits the fighters right in the midst of the attack, causing them to cry out in pain. Reito makes a desperate lunge, hoping to break through his opponent's defense. However, Kazuki dodges with unfathomable grace, showing complete superiority. Another attack by Reito ends in failure and a painful flick on the forehead. The fight is over, and the exhausted fighters fall to their knees, admitting their defeat. Reito greedily drinks cool water, trying to catch his breath after the grueling sparring, blasting of the unproper dested of you. A heavy silence reigns all around, broken only by the ragged breathing of the fighters exhausted from sparring. Kusanagi Minato wipes sweat from his forehead, still not fully believing what happened. Even the recognized leaders of the academy are forced to admit the overwhelming superiority of their opponents. Reito can barely contain his amazement as he realizes the scale of the power that has been revealed to him. Their gazes are full of hidden tension, revealing deep thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, Kazuki maintains his usual silence, immersed in his own dark thoughts. Igor recalls that fateful day that divided his life into before and after, when a tremendous shock awakened hidden power. Those around try to logically explain what happened, losing sight of the true background of the events. But Kazuki understands perfectly well that behind the apparent simplicity lies something much more dangerous. He watches his comrades from the sidelines, feeling like an outsider at this festival of naivety. The sun slowly sets, filling the streets with a soft crimson glow. The journey home is spent in a lively conversation, where Kusanagi Minato does not miss the opportunity to tease his friend. The conversation turns to everyday life, revealing unexpected sides of the guy's characters. Kazuki looks at his interlocutor skeptically, genuinely perplexed by his Spartan diet. Raito immediately takes advantage of the moment to turn a friendly reproach into a reason for concern. Despite some slight resistance, Kusanagi Minato is adamant in his decision to feed the guest. Kazuki only sighs quietly, mentally acknowledging the persistence of his new acquaintance. The warm atmosphere of the evening city encourages trust and erases previous barriers. They stop at a familiar residential complex, where they will spend many more long evenings. New challenges await them ahead, but for now they can allow themselves a little rest from the hustle and bustle. In the familiar silence of the house, Kazuki suddenly finds himself surrounded by a noisy gang of excited children. The happy owner of the apartment hurries to the table with plates, apologizing for the mess made by the children. Before he could come to his senses, Kazuki, with a light movement of magic, returned the scattered children to their place, accompanied by the frightened cries of their owner. One of the girls immediately reaches out to him, demanding more and more attention, while Kazuki sullenly states a truce. Watching this scene, the owner of the house is genuinely surprised at how easily the stern guy finds a common language with the children. A flash of the past heats the air. Before Kazuki's eyes rises the terrible images of war and lonely, frightened children among the ruins. Softening his gaze, he quietly says that he considers children to be the true treasure of this world. The owner immediately laughs it off, urging the guest not to grumble like an old man, but warmth flickers in his eyes. He turns around with a smile, feeling like part of a real, albeit temporary, family. At dinner, everyone folds their hands together to express gratitude for the long-awaited food. The kids pounce on the treats with gusto, happily gobbling up the goodies from the sticks. Kazuki also starts eating, immersing himself in the cozy atmosphere. A wave of nostalgia washed over him. During the harsh war years, home-cooked food seemed like an unattainable luxury. The owner of the house explains that the mother has to disappear at work until night, and the father left the family long ago, so all the worries fall on his shoulders. Kazuki respectfully admits that the boy's burden was not an easy one. He just laughs carefree, declaring that he never complains about difficulties. Kazuki looks at him thoughtfully, mentally agreeing with the strength of his character. At the end of the dinner, the host, with a smile, encourages the household, reminding them that any obstacles only strengthen the spirit. Finally, the children, tired from the day, and both boys fall asleep peacefully side by side under the same blankets. And abuse. In the silence of the night, Kusanagi Minato quietly throws out soothing words, trying to relieve the tension. His comrade responds with restrained gratitude for the concern shown. Kusanagi Minato just weighs it off, reminding that it's all about that unfortunate arm injury. But in the darkness, thoughts turn to strange reflections on something greater. Kusanagi Minato can't help but wonder if there isn't something more to all this concern. A sudden shock hits him as the realization of reality hits his nerves. However, the satellite himself considers what is happening to be a completely natural coincidence. Kusanagi Minato finds himself feeling a strange affinity with this lonely path. Morning greets the heroes with the usual bustle on the way to the academic buildings. The energetic Raito immediately notices his friend's lateness, not missing the chance to joke. A sleepy Kazuki tries to justify himself, while Leito looks suspiciously at their joint appearance. Kusanagi Minato ponders whether the morning chatter is worth bothering about at all. However, the peace is interrupted by an unexpected and disturbing visit. Kusanagi Minato frowned, recognizing the uninvited guests as old acquaintances. They are quick to apologize for the intrusion, citing force majeure. The situation is escalating. The threat of a new large-scale disaster is at stake. Kazuki rightly reminds him that he is just a student and should not interfere in such matters. But the authorities are adamant. Kusanagi Minato's past achievements make him indispensable. They admit that the police are powerless in the face of the gathering storm. With a serious and heavy look, they directly ask Kusanagi Minato for help that cannot be refused. They admit that the police are powerless in the face of the gathering storm. With a serious and heavy look, they directly ask Kusanagi Minato for help that cannot be refused. But Kazuki maintains a cool calm, mentally doubting the correctness of this decision and preferring not to attract unnecessary attention to himself. Raito and his companion enthusiastically accept the offer, ready to follow them everywhere. However, the news that Kusanagi Minato will have to act provokes an unexpected response from his loyal comrades. They declare that they will not stand aside and will cover his rear, despite the danger of the situation. Raito casts an appraising and critical glance at them, trying to understand their true intentions. He doubts whether these elite students are strong enough to compete with what he is facing. Even the proudest of them feel the weight of his words and their own powerlessness in the face of the unknown. Having received a refusal, the adults ask the others to return to the academy, leaving Kusanagi Minato with a new choice. Suddenly, a sharp shout is heard, causing the entire group to freeze in surprise. But Kusanagi Minato only flippantly throws over his shoulder a call to follow him. His comrades exchange glances, but quickly cast aside their doubts. With a smile, they rush without hesitation after him into the thick of things. Meanwhile, the academy is immersed in the silence of the tall building where destinies are decided. All the key figures had gathered in the spacious hall, awaiting the start of the official interrogation. An official opens the hearing by announcing the involvement of a student whose name is already making headlines after the recent disaster. Kazuki rises from his seat under the gaze of those gathered. Whispers run through the ranks as students discuss how he was the one who defeated the powerful boss in the recent incident. Kazuki bears this attention in silence, while those around him freeze in shock at the scale of his actions. The speaker clears his throat, attracting everyone's attention, and the tension in the room reaches its peak. The officials and military personnel present stare intently at the blank screen, awaiting further instructions. A triumphant voice announces the feat of Kusanagi Minato, the same student who single-handedly prevented a catastrophe at the academy. At this time, a hand is extended in front of Kazuki with a clear instruction to perceive him not as a simple student, but as a full-fledged operative. However, a hidden discontent immediately grows among those present. Mature men are outraged that a boy is being put on par with professionals. The gray-haired officer sternly interrupts the argument, calling on everyone to focus on the task at hand and begin the cleanup immediately. Kazuki maintains an icy calm while his colleagues in the distance are overcome with anxiety and doubt. Kusanagi Minato comes closer, apologizing for the commotion and difficult situation he caused. Kazuki just shakes his head slightly, understanding the full weight of the burden that fell on his comrade's shoulders. A frightened Sanada, with tears in her eyes, reproaches herself for her weakness and inability to stop what is happening. But Kusanagi Minato smiles softly, casting aside the grievances and calming his companion with his kindness. Sanada looks at him in awe, amazed at how magnanimous he is even in such a situation. Sitting in the service car, Kazuki calmly assesses the balance of forces and requests data on the enemy's numbers. Kusanagi Minato voices the numbers, 80 magicians, of which only a few possess a truly high rank. Kazuki instantly analyzes their capabilities, recalling the limits of mid- and high-level magic. Reito and Kazuki exchange glances, realizing the danger of the upcoming operation in a confined space. A police car with flashing lights is racing at full speed towards the unknown. The tactical map shows the terrifying silhouettes of magical creatures, ready to tear apart any intruder. Kazuki frowned, realizing that against such advanced intelligence of monsters, brute force and a frontal attack were doomed to failure. Through the tinted glass of the car, Kazuki notices a strange detail. The soldiers are going on a mission without their usual heavy weapons. Kazuki's mind races, trying to find logic in what's happening, as the current state of affairs is strikingly different from previous safety standards. His gaze falls on the reflection in a rearview mirror, where the tension on his companion's face is clearly visible. From a bird's-eye view, the scale of the approaching nightmare seems frighteningly vast. The streets are clogged with cars, and troops have already lined up at the edge of the destroyed sector. Monstrous monsters fill the horizon, and although a full-fledged breakthrough has not yet occurred, their numbers exceed all imaginable limits. Kazuki stood frozen at the fence, trying in vain to comprehend the absurdity of the situation and find the answer to the main question. The rest of the comrades rush behind in panic, not believing their own eyes and horrified by the threat. Amidst the chaos and demonic presence, fear grips everyone, making them doubt their chances of survival. Someone exclaims in despair that to resist such a force alone is tantamount to suicide because there is no one else to rely on. Raito turns pale in shock, realizing the hopelessness of his situation. The remaining employees are panicked because if there is no help to be expected, they will have to engage in mortal combat without any support. Kazuki looks coldly at Raito, assessing his condition and challenging his battle-tested comrade. Raito accepts the challenge with grim determination, though a shadow of doubt still glimmers in his eyes. Those around him look at him in horror, accusing him of recklessness and an attempt to show off in the face of inevitable death. One of the agents, with a trembling voice, notes that the usual order of things is collapsing before our eyes. The monsters let out a deafening roar as they rush forward, sowing absolute death and destruction around them. Debris from structures flies in all directions under the onslaught of an invisible and ferocious element. The team below freezes in horror, realizing that this is not just an alarm, but a real disaster. The scarlet fog and demonic forces are rapidly consuming new territories, engulfing the country in fire and panic. The voice on the radio heartlessly repeats the terrible verdict, announcing the rapid spread of disaster throughout the entire territory. Kazuki stares gloomily into space, realizing the harsh reality. Priority has been given to megacities, but they remain cut off from the world. The system coldly cuts off. There will be no help. No one will save the province. People around are choking with panic, not believing their ears. Kazuki gloomily ponders the nature of what is happening, since the natural disaster unnaturally coincided with the appearance of terrible creatures. The situation is getting tense, and everyone understands that it is no longer possible to sit idly by. Kazuki casts a stern look at the situation, feeling his worst fears coming true. The crimson sky is illuminated by an eerie light as hordes of monsters rush towards the defenseless neighborhoods. Amidst the general chaos, panic begins, because there is no one to resist such a force. Kazuki coldly assesses the situation, cutting off the hysterical screams of those around him. Without listening to anyone's objections, Kazuki quickly rushes from his place straight into the thick of the approaching nightmare. The monsters surround the area in a tight ring, anticipating a bloody massacre. Kazuki lands in the very center of the enemy ring, taking the fight with lightning speed. Monsters fill the entire space around, emitting a deafening animal roar. Sharp teeth close an inch from the target, turning the air into a solid mess. The others scream in horror as they watch their comrade become trapped. A flash of green energy dispels the darkness, causing the companions to freeze in surprise. Reito watches the rapid movement, feeling the tension growing. A powerful blow crushes the first monsters, tearing their armor to shreds. Fragments of bodies fly in all directions under the onslaught of crushing force. The monsters bared their teeth in rage, ready to crush the daring daredevil into dust. New magical seals flash across the battlefield, signaling the beginning of a merciless battle. A powerful explosion shakes the space, but Kazuki remains unperturbed inside the shining dome. The guy smirks at his own thoughts, however. Relying solely on your own invulnerability is not worth it when dozens of eyes are watching your every move. With a single wave of his hand, he activates a complex magical seal, cutting through the air with streams of pure energy. An indescribable awe grows among the observers. Reito is amazed by how many elements this fighter simultaneously controls. The other companions also have no intention of standing aside and rush forward with the firm intention of helping. The tension is building to the extreme, causing even seasoned fighters to tremble with fear. However, fear quickly gives way to fighting spirit. No one wants to lose face in the face of such a formidable danger. Bright flashes of spells illuminate the gloomy dungeon as the new arrivals engage their enemies. Kazuki takes a quick look at his allies and notes with slight surprise that they are much stronger than they seemed at first glance. But it's too early to relax. A new threat materializes from the deep shadows, radiating a deadly aura. The sinister demon strides forward, oppressing those around him with his heavy presence. One of the magicians realizes with horror that their current powers are catastrophically insufficient to defeat this monster. A furious roar of the elements shatters the silence as a powerful torrent of water crashes down on the monster, forcing Kazuki to take shelter from the rising storm. Surrounded by glowing runes, Kazuki takes the initiative, distributing roles before the decisive blow. The comrades exchange glances, feeling the full weight of the responsibility placed upon them. They peer into the dissipating fog, not believing their own eyes. Is the battle really over? A sigh of triumphant relief escapes the lips of the amazed spectators, recognizing the magician's incredible skill. Meanwhile, Kusanagi urges the others not to waste time and continue clearing out the ordinary creatures. Dark images of the past come to mind, when 60 years ago the world first faced this unimaginable catastrophe. Kazuki clenches his teeth with anger, fully understanding what a repeat of the old nightmare would lead to. Kazuki is determined to do everything possible to prevent a repeat of the tragedy and protect this world. However, reality around them is rapidly collapsing, plunging people into an abyss of panic and despair. The monstrous creatures of darkness leave no time for reflection, rushing into the attack with incredible fury. But right in the middle of this chaos, a mysterious stranger in a dark cloak appears. He stands between the frightened people and the monsters, causing a strange sense of déjà vu in the survivors. The familiar silhouette and aura make the heart stop with recognition. Kazuki extends a helping hand, restoring the lost man's footing. His piercing gaze reveals deep concentration and a heavy awareness of the moment. The girl standing nearby looks at her savior in amazement, trying to comprehend the scale of his incredible power. But the blush and embarrassment that flared up on her cheeks made her immediately and desperately drive away these inappropriate thoughts. The next second, a sharp explosion makes her jump back in fear. A brilliant flash of protective spell cuts through the air, driving away the approaching threat. Kazuki gently apologizes for his abruptness, but immediately returns to his cool and collected demeanor. He gives a clear order to stay behind him, unmistakably identifying the allies' weaknesses. His words once again echo with a storm of emotions in his companion's chest, completely depriving her of the power of speech. She looks at that confident back with awe, involuntarily wondering if this is really an ordinary student in front of her. Meanwhile, the remaining magicians try to fight back against the monsters, but fear paralyzes their movements. They tremble with horror, realizing the hopelessness of their situation in the face of superior enemy forces. The appearance of an even more powerful subspecies of demon plunges the fighters into absolute shock. Even the presence of powerful mages no longer guarantees their survival in this massacre. Amidst the panic and chaos, Kazuki calmly steps forward, attracting everyone's attention. His comrades, horrified, try to stop him, shouting that they cannot cope with this monster alone. But Kazuki only gives a short and confident glance, not doubting his own strength. The rest of the fighters freeze in confusion, not believing their eyes. One of them looks at his hands in amazement, realizing that the animal fear has disappeared somewhere. Reito clasps his hands in prayer, looking at his comrade with hope. One of the mages whispers enthusiastically that such power is capable of crushing even elite demons. The sound of air cutting through the battlefield echoes as Kazuki rushes towards the threat. An admiring Reito encourages him, urging him to show the true greatness of magic. The remaining fighters hastily erect defensive barriers, hoping to hold back the onslaught. The monster bares its teeth in anticipation of a bloody massacre. Kazuki maintains an icy calm as deadly energy rages around him. Powerful magical attacks rain down on enemies, shaking the battlefield. Explosions and destructive waves grind any obstacles in their path into dust. Magic shields can barely withstand the enemy's monstrous pressure. Amidst the raging flames, Kazuki stands with a completely calm face. The comrades are shocked to realize the scale of this overwhelming first-rank power, and Kazuki himself calmly shakes the dust off his shoulder as if nothing special had happened. Even the terrifying demon freezes in silent stupor, trying to comprehend the scale of the threat facing him. Tool. Kazuki remains unperturbed, assessing the situation with the cold calculation of a seasoned strategist. The monster grins bloodthirstily, ready to tear the impudent intruder to pieces. An incredible avalanche of pure mana rises up around Kazuki, causing the air to tremble with tension. The accomplices watch the unfolding disaster in horror, not believing their own eyes. Meanwhile, Kazuki calmly weighs his options for further action in the midst of the roaring flames. Magic seals multiply at an alarming rate, surrounding the battlefield on all sides. Kusanagi Minato is shocked to realize that the monsters are not acting randomly, they are coordinating the attack. Reito screams out his comrade's name in panic, sensing imminent disaster. Deadly bolts of lightning cut through space, heading straight for Kazuki. But the young man doesn't even flinch, maintaining icy calm in the eye of the storm. Elemental currents rage around him, but not a single spark can penetrate his invisible defense. Energy bolts shatter against Kazuki's barrier, scattering into a myriad of sparks. The monster opens its many eyes in pure, superstitious horror at what is happening. And Kazuki just throws out a lazy question, as if all this is just a boring routine. Kusanagi Minato stands frozen in shock, trying to comprehend the monstrous power of the stranger. Reito can't believe his eyes as he watches the grand performance. Kusanagi Minato clutches his head, realizing that the laws of the familiar world are crumbling before his eyes. The magic circles flare up with renewed vigor, confirming the highest status of what is happening. Kusanagi Minato addresses his allies, trying to find some kind of rational explanation. But even at this moment, Kusanagi Minato cannot hide his deep shock at Kazuki's strength. The usual laws of magic seem to lose their power here, as spells usually require pauses and recovery. But now, before the astonished eyes of Reito, something completely unimaginable is happening. Reito's gaze fills with awe. His intuition was truly right. Before them, it is as if a legend comes to life, embodying the very essence of unrivaled power. The monster lets out a deafening roar full of rage, shaking the space around it. But Kazuki remains icy calm and decides to seize the initiative. An instant change of position, and a powerful stream of wind rushes straight at the monster. The monster chokes on pain and surprise, losing its balance under the onslaught of the elements. And Kazuki himself hovers easily and gracefully over the battlefield, surrounded by streams of magic. The creature tries to understand the intentions of the impudent youth, but is faced only with impeccable calculation. Perfect coordination of movements allows Kazuki to completely control the battlefield. With a slight smile on his lips, Kazuki declares that he no longer needs to hold back here. Another blast of the elements hits the monster, causing it to shudder. Kazuki's attack speed is astounding, leaving his opponent far behind. The monster tries to parry the swift attacks, but only gets stuck deeper in defense. Powerful streams of energy alternate, turning the arena into the epicenter of a natural storm. Kazuki moves forward with unwavering determination, leaving the enemy no chance. The monster roars in impotence, but the mad onslaught continues without delay. Kusanagi Minato addresses his allies, trying to find some kind of rational explanation. But even at this moment, Kusanagi Minato cannot hide his deep shock at Kazuki's strength. Kazuki squares his shoulders and prepares for an unexpected move, completely ignoring the traditional rules of combat. The monster roars in rage, choking with rage and contempt for the impudent boy. In an instant, Kazuki is thrown from his spot, enveloped in a dense ring of magical energy. He sensibly judged that spells were powerless against this armor and decided to rely on the pure brute force of his fists. A powerful blow falls upon the monster from above, causing the ground to shake with tension. Kazuki doesn't even try to hide his victorious smile, because his daring plan works flawlessly. A heavy fist slams the menacing creature into the stone floor, sending out a shower of blinding sparks. The bewildered monster barely has time to comprehend what is happening. Did this guy really hurt him? A huge clawed paw cuts through the air, trying to stop the impudent fellow. But the monster freezes in a sticky stupor, not believing its own eyes. A wild, animalistic roar splits the air, but a distinct hint of panic can already be heard in it. Kazuki takes a fighting stance, smiling brightly at his defeated but still dangerous enemy. Kazuki only squints slyly, promising his opponent a much more impressive sight. The boy's face lights up with anticipation as he decides to demonstrate the true extent of his power. The space around begins to warp, filling with the iridescent glow of primordial energy. The very air around begins to crack from the colossal pressure, soaring upward in multicolored columns of flame. The monster freezes in horror, looking with bewilderment at the incredible cataclysm. The remaining fighters feel the temperature around them rapidly dropping with alarming confusion. A bright glow pierces the sky, immersing the battlefield in a surreal, ominous atmosphere. In place of Kazuki, the mysterious silhouette of Raito flashes for a moment, his blue eyes glowing with a mischievous and confident gleam. Raito assumes a fighting stance, surrounded by a shimmering aura of incredible power. The monster grins mockingly, declaring that human attacks are powerless against their indestructible armor. But Raito is not going to listen to other people's self-confident speeches and rushes into the attack with lightning speed. A powerful blow falls upon the giant from the sky, shaking the very air around him. The guy's speed exceeds all expectations, leaving behind only blinding flashes of light. Each subsequent attack breaks through the monster's defense, causing it to choke from unexpected pain. The allies watching from the side cannot believe their eyes, standing frozen in shock. They know very well that ordinary weapons are not capable of even scratching such monsters. Meanwhile, the stunned demon realizes with horror that human strength is somehow working against him. Raito calmly points out the obvious traditional methods of fighting the creatures of darkness are truly ineffective. But once you combine internal energy and martial arts, ordinary combat reaches a completely different level. This unique magical combat technique erases the line between man and a previously invincible creature. The monster flies into a rage, refusing to believe that a pathetic mortal could surpass him in power. The creature rushes forward in a desperate attempt to tear the impudent enemy to pieces. However, Raito remains completely calm in the face of mortal threat. With one precise movement, he concentrates his energy, preparing to deliver the decisive blow. A powerful fist, engulfed in aura flames, slams straight into the giant's chest. A monstrous roar scatters the monster, sending it into a deep knockout. The defeated giant collapses to the ground under the astonished gaze of the remaining creatures of darkness. Raito towers over the battlefield, a living embodiment of triumph and new hope. The chaos recedes as quickly as it began, leaving the survivors stunned by the realization of what happened. Kusanagi Minato does not allow himself or the others to relax, calling on them to finish off the remaining creatures. The center of everyone's attention is Kazuki, whose calm gaze expresses only cold confidence. The energy around him swirls into a vortex of primal power, lifting the boy off the ground. Kazuki surveys the battlefield, assessing the scale of destruction with his characteristic equanimity. A slight movement of the shoulders is like a warm-up before a familiar task, although martial techniques have not been used at full force for a long time. He closes the distance with lightning speed, leaving behind only traces of magical flashes. Pausing for a moment, Kazuki calmly takes in the surroundings. His gaze glides over the silhouettes of his comrades and allies gathered nearby. All eyes turn to the hero whose intervention changed the outcome of this battle. Kusanagi Minato pays tribute to the victor, expressing general recognition for the rescue. The line of soldiers freezes in a military salute, saluting those who stopped the disaster. Meanwhile, news of the global incident is rapidly spreading around the world via giant monitor screens. Experts and the magical elite officially confirm the elimination of the threat on Japanese territory. A murmur of admiration runs through the crowd. Everyone's attention is riveted on the mysterious protector. Rumors of a mysterious mage in black instantly become the main topic of discussion. Kazuki's face begins to sweat slightly with embarrassment. It's becoming increasingly difficult to hide his identity. As soon as he returned to class, the boy was immediately bombarded with a barrage of enthusiastic questions from his classmates. Kazuki sighs heavily, trying to brush off the annoying attention from those around him. Reito watches the proceedings with a calm smile, while Kazuki himself would prefer to dissolve into silence. A lecture on the hidden threat and inevitability of magical wars makes the students swallow nervously in the silence of the classroom. The teacher casts a meaningful glance at the rows, hinting that among those sitting here, there is already someone who has experienced the seamy side of this world. Everyone's attention is instantly drawn to Kazuki, who remains stoic in silence with his hands folded on his desk. But the sudden sound of a door swinging open breaks the silence of the classroom as uninvited guests in uniform appear on the threshold. A frightened teacher panics as she tries to figure out who these people are who burst in unannounced in the middle of class. However, unexpected visitors have a good excuse in the form of an official pass from the director himself. They arrive not for inspection, but out of urgent need, turning directly to Kusanagi Minato with a plea for help. Kazuki, with bitter irony, notes to himself that the Guardians of Order have completely lost all shame and secrecy. Unable to bear the annoying whispers and curious glances of his classmates, he noisily exhales from the accumulated irritation. Getting up from his desk, Kazuki demands that the situation be immediately clarified, receiving assurances from the guests of complete safety and a generous reward for their assistance. Police explain the scale of the disaster. In addition to the catastrophe that has befallen the world, monsters and dangerous criminal gangs have become active everywhere. The situation has reached a critical point, and the authorities are desperately short of trained fighters, which is why they are forced to once again rely on Kusanagi Minato. The guy is gently hinted that in future such issues can be resolved much more quickly via mobile communications. The officer, with trepidation and some reverence, picks up the smartphone where Kusanagi's treasured personal contact is now visible. Kazuki calmly assesses the situation, estimating the scale of the work ahead and his role in all this fuss. The guests explain the essence of the problem haltingly, pointing to a new source of chaos, but Kazuki already grasps the main point. An offer to give a ride sounds too long for someone who is used to acting proactively. In one swift motion, Kazuki activates spatial magic, declaring that he will go to the scene alone. The stunned police barely have time to watch the disappearing figure of the guy, who has dissolved into the glow of the portal. The deserted streets of Harajuku greet arrivals with eerie silence and destruction, foreshadowing a quick battle with the creatures of chaos. Amidst the rubble and dust, a little boy desperately tries to comfort his crying little brother, holding him to his chest. His childish face shows an unchildish determination to protect his family until the very end. But from the darkness of the ruins, a monstrous figure of a beast is already emerging, ready to tear apart defenseless children. Gathering his last strength, the older brother grabs the baby by the hand and rushes away to the sound of falling stones. One wrong step and a life-saving escape turns into a fall into a dark trap. The monster's enormous mouth looms over them, blocking out the last rays of the bloody sky. At this critical moment, a protected barrier rises in front of the children, taking on the full force of the blow. Kazuki appears out of nowhere, offering a helping hand to those who have already given up hope of survival. Kneeling down, he brings hope back to the frightened children in a soft, soothing voice. An unexpected gift in the form of a funny toy makes the younger one forget about the recent horror. Kazuki smiles warmly, seeing the sincere, childish joy, but there is catastrophically not enough time for long tenderness. Leaving the rescued people in the care of the arriving police, he quickly rushes towards a new threat. The shining portal carries the children to safety, and the eldest manages to express deep gratitude to the savior. The baby hugs the treasured toy with delight, warmed by the warmth of this terrible day. Kazuki moves through the ruined streets with lightning speed, assessing the scale of the disaster with a cold and calculating mind. In this chaos, one cannot act blindly. Among the panicked crowd, magical streams merge into a colorful carousel. The flow of energy dispels the darkness, but the city demands strict priorities in this unequal struggle. A police officer notices a familiar silhouette breaking through the rubble of collapsed buildings. Memory immediately brings up the image of that same mysterious guy from the nightmarish day of the disaster. Assessing the situation on the fly, Kazuki demands a report on the current state of affairs on the front lines. Concentrating his magical energy, Kazuki declares that he will take this threat upon himself. At that moment, warnings from his comrades about outlaw criminals operating in the area came back to him. Assessing the situation, Kazuki frowned and thought about the scale of what was happening. Among the ruins, the surviving officials look around in confusion. One of them looks at the young magician with horror, not understanding where he gets such destructive power from. People around are wondering if this guy came to the rescue in the darkest hour. After all, civilians had never encountered such chaos before. Kazuki recalls the words that such anomalies are rare, unseen in the last 50 years. But along with the monsters, a previously unknown force also grows. Realizing that the scale of the disaster exceeds the strength of an individual, he decides to act preemptively. Using spatial magic, he instantly evacuates the victims to a safe zone. Rescuers and police look on in amazement at what is happening, promptly receiving the rescued citizens. Among those who arrive to help, Raito was also rushing to help his comrade at any moment. The rescued families can finally breathe a sigh of relief, sincerely rejoicing at their miraculous salvation. Kazuki notices his approaching ally and greets him with a slight smile. Grateful people shake the hero's hands, acknowledging that without him the sacrifices would have been inevitable. But Kazuki shrugs it off modestly, placing the blame on the shoulders of ordinary police officers and firefighters. Those around him are amazed by his maturity and composure in such a dangerous situation. Former ill-wishers bow low, acknowledging their past mistakes and apologizing for their arrogance on the day of disaster. Think, Kamen. The adult partner feels uneasy, admitting that they are relying too much on the young man at such a dangerous time. Kazuki reassures her, noting that it was his own decision, although the scale of the disaster and the growing power of the monsters are indeed alarming. At this moment, children timidly approach them, embarrassedly interrupting the conversation. The older boy warmly thanks Kazuki for his recent rescue, genuinely glad that everyone is safe. The younger one, enchanted, presses the souvenir to his chest and, with pure childish awe, asks the cherished question. Kazuki is slightly embarrassed by this admiring gaze and hastens to clarify. The baby peers at the tiny toy with a striking resemblance. A barely noticeable sly smile flickers across Kazuki's face. He decides to play along and, with slight enthusiasm, confirms the children's guesses. The boy's face lights up with genuine delight, because he has finally met his idol. Meanwhile, Raito himself is sitting in hiding, feeling out of place from this sudden wave of popularity. An enterprising fellow immediately flies up to him with a stack of documents, enthusiastically describing the grandiose prospects of the merch. He passionately proves that the demand for souvenirs with the hero's symbols will only grow with each passing year. Meanwhile, Kazuki gently takes the happy child into his arms, noting that toys alone cannot save this world. But even amidst the ruins, he understands that the true need for hope and the protection of the great saint remains unchanged. Meanwhile, elsewhere, trembling traders report the situation to a dangerous new player. Hidden in the shadows of the opulent hall is a secret organization of mages led by Satoshi Osamu, nicknamed the Black Bandit. A dark authority towers over his trembling subordinates, asking in a chilling voice for details of the daring challenge. The shadow hanging over the frightened people leaves no doubt the retribution for insolence will be cruel. So, horror grips the survivors, causing them to choke on panicked screams. An imperious command breaks the silence. The mysterious magician in black must be found at any cost. Shadows deepen as powerful figures begin to make sinister plans for the brash newcomer. Kaga Shuji, the cold-blooded leader of the Kabukicho branch of the secret organization of magicians, takes charge of the matter. But Kusanagi Minato only smiles in anticipation, ready to accept the challenge of fate. His sinister grin does not bode well for his opponents. Meanwhile, at the training ground, Kazuki calls a break, putting an end to the grueling training. The students are breathing heavily, but even through their fatigue, they feel colossal progress. Kazuki looks at his comrades with a slight smile, fully understanding how much effort it took them to get to this point. However, his comrades look at him as an incomprehensible natural disaster. They wonder what the true limit of power is for someone who hasn't even tried during training. And then the main question addressed to Kusanagi Minato sounds, What is his real reserve of magical power? A lively debate begins among friends, as their imagination conjures up astronomical figures. Kazuki himself calmly watches this heated discussion from the sidelines. He is genuinely surprised by other people's reasoning, because the figure of 1 million seems absurd to him. Is the legendary limit of magical power of 1 million units really about him? Kazuki decides to look at his phone to dispel his own doubts. But long searches on the internet do not bring answers, causing him to only sigh hopelessly. He decides to put this confusing puzzle out of his head because there are much more important things ahead of him. An unexpected phone call interrupts Kazuki's thoughts, bringing him back to reality. Raito checks to see if Kazuki's friends are nearby and asks to put the phone on speaker so everyone can hear. A confused Kazuki wonders why the conversation is being broadcast to the entire room, while Raito commands him to press the right button. Raito explains that due to the recent disasters and the exploding number of monsters, the decision was made to create a new specialized unit. This unit must unite the best specialists to counter the impending threat. And suddenly, Raito offers Kusanagi Minato to lead this squad as a commander. The news shocks the friends, as such a position is the cherished dream of any magician, and no one expected such a turn of events. However, Kusanagi Minato's own reaction turns out to be completely unpredictable when he abruptly declares his refusal. Raito sincerely does not understand the reasons for such a decision, and looks askance at his indignant comrade with distrust. Raito continues to explain that the regular police simply cannot cope with the increased workload, and they cannot all stand alone. Kazuki ponders thoughtfully whether the root of all the troubles lies in the insufficient level of training of young magicians. Meanwhile, the conversation turns to the influential magical aristocracy, whose key houses, Mizuha, Kaichi, and Homarai, have still not returned from an overseas meeting. At this point, Raito notices that Kusanagi Minato's parents have also been away for a long time due to their constant travel. The discussion turns to the composition of the new squad, where Raito proposes including Mizuha Yuka, Mizuha Ruka, and Katsuragi Ryuji. The tension mounts, and Raito, on the other end of the line, begins to lose his composure. Unable to bear it, Raito bursts into tears and begs Kusanagi Minato to save the situation and take command. Kusanagi Minato sighs, adjusts his collar, and suddenly agrees to take on this burden. Hearing the long-awaited answer, Raito almost dropped the phone from the delight that overwhelmed him. The rest of the friends immediately declare their support, expressing their willingness to join the squad along with Kusanagi Minato. Kusanagi Minato himself remains reserved, wondering whether his modest skills in raising magi are truly sufficient for such a responsible role. Meanwhile, panic is growing on television screens. The news is full of headlines about a new wave of attacks and harsh criticism directed at the Fuka family. Behind the scenes, the old aristocracy looks with disdain at the rising tide of discontent, believing the common people incapable of understanding their true power. But the sudden intrusion of a servant interrupts the thoughts of the head of the family, who brings urgent dispatches from the Capitol Police. The papers contain a daring message about the creation of a new detachment, which only evokes a caustic grin from the proud aristocrat. However, there is something more to this news that could finally calm the raging crowd. Without wasting any time, he gives the order to immediately call his wayward son to involve him in the new game. Meanwhile, within the walls of the special department, a life of its own is in full swing, full of strict discipline and hidden tension. Kazuki appears in front of the camera in a formal uniform, personifying an exemplary magician of the new formation. Next to him, Raito and the rest of his comrades stand confidently, ready for any surprises. A cool atmosphere permeates the spacious briefing room, where experienced officers and newly minted cadets look each other in the eye for the first time. The organizers shrug their shoulders in the face of the harsh reality. They have only a dozen fighters at their disposal. Kazuki instantly reads the situation, guessing what kind of storm has arisen at the top due to the appointment of a simple student to such a high post. The chief of staff personally confirms the guy's authority by handing him an important document. An official symbol of power materializes in Kazuki's palm, a sign that grants enormous powers, but only for the duration of his service in the squad. Raito and the other team members carefully examine the tokens they were given, realizing the gravity of their situation. The colleague pats Kazuki on the shoulder encouragingly, shifting the entire burden of responsibility onto the shoulders of the young commander. At that moment, a familiar, intoxicating feeling of absolute superiority over those around him flares up in Kazuki's soul. Taking a step forward, he confidently declares his high status as the commander of a special magic squad. His bold promise to make his subordinates stronger than the elite aristocracy falls like a stone into the silence of the hall. Raito and her comrades are frozen in shock, not believing their own ears after such a loud statement. The other briefing participants simultaneously drop their jaws, shocked by the unheard-of audacity of the newcomer who has set his sights on the holy of holies of the magical world. Kazuki remains icy calm, noticing everyone's confusion, and invites the audience to see for themselves. He asks Shido-san if he has specialized equipment for measuring magical potential, and he nods in agreement. Soon, the entire group moves into a spacious training hall, where massive magical storage crystals tower. Kazuki gestures to the first two targets, inviting Ruka and Ryuji to demonstrate their hidden reserves. The students step forward without a shadow of a doubt, preparing to release their pent-up energy onto the test benches. A powerful burst of magic illuminates the room with a blinding blue and fiery glow, causing the air to vibrate with tension. Kazuki expertly states the initial indicators, voicing the previous modest numbers of the subjects. But the numbers on the scoreboard skyrocket to an unimaginable 30,000, throwing the girl into absolute shock and making her forget about everything. Ryuji barely has time to exhale in amazement when his own result freezes at 28,000. The remaining observers freeze in place, unable to believe that the numbers on the monitors are real. Kazuki turns his gaze to the next participant, making it clear that the most shocking show is just beginning. Yuka swallows the growing lump in her throat, feeling her palms break out in a cold sweat in the face of the inevitable. She hesitantly approaches the giant crystal, feeling like a grain of sand in the face of its colossal power. Dark thoughts plague her mind. What if the gap between her and her sister proves unbridgeable? Anxiety grips my heart like a vice, forcing me to press the fabric of my uniform to my chest with a trembling hand in a desperate attempt to suppress my fear. Gathering her courage, Yuka releases streams of energy, enveloping herself in a shining cocoon of pure magic. Those around him again widen their eyes in amazement, not understanding how ordinary indicators can undergo such a monstrous metamorphosis. The girl herself freezes in panic, afraid to even look at the flickering numbers of the verdict. A bright flash on the display registers an incredible 26,000 units of magical energy. The shock on the observers' faces reaches its limit, because, according to old records, this figure barely reached a measly 2,000. Kazuki gently touches his companion, as if trying to calm the storm in her heart. His gaze is full of unexpected tenderness and warmth, which makes even the air around him seem softer. A light touch on the top of her blue-haired head makes her freeze in surprise. The girl's eyes instantly fill with tears, and a bright blush appears on her cheeks from the overwhelming emotions. She can hardly contain her emotions because for her this simple affection means much more than any words. Raito and the others also receive their share of approval, but the atmosphere around them immediately becomes tense. The proud heiress of a noble family tries to maintain her appearance, but a real hurricane is already raging inside her. Kazuki continues to act on instinct, without thinking at all about subordination and rules of decency. The rest of those present just silently clutch their heads, anticipating the imminent catastrophe. The realization of what the reckless guy has done leaves his comrades in a slight stupor. The menacing shout catches Kazuki off guard, causing him to immediately remove his hand. The young aristocrat breathes a sigh of relief, glad that the anger has passed them by, although completely unexpected thoughts are racing through her head. A sudden roar breaks the silence as an uninvited guest appears in the hallway. Frightening everyone with his shouting, the indignant representative of the senior officials demands an immediate explanation. The attendant turns pale, trying to justify himself to the angry, high-ranking gentleman. The secretary just rolls his eyes tiredly, realizing that this visit does not bode well. An important figure from the influential magical aristocracy enters the arena, the eldest son of the influential Fuka family. Kazuki listens carefully to the informant's whisper, assessing the situation. Aristocrats are accustomed to ignoring the troubles of others, but they defend their own position with fanatical persistence. This world is full of arrogance, and it's up to Kazuki to show these arrogant snobs their true place. The unexpected guest with emerald hair raises his eyebrows in bewilderment, trying to comprehend the very idea of ordinary students appearing in such an elite place. One of the attendants immediately points to Kusanagi Minato, declaring him a hero who managed to prevent a devastating catastrophe right within the academy's walls. The smug aristocrat immediately explodes with indignation, refusing to believe that some commoner without magic could surpass the natural-born lords. Forgetting his manners, the insolent fat man closes the distance and looms over Kazuki with a contemptuous grin, demonstratively showing his superiority. Suddenly, Raito and his companions cannot stand such rudeness and sharply stand up for Kusanagi, demanding that the boar immediately get out. However, the smug nobleman only smiles condescendingly, looking at the irascibility of other people's emotions from the height of his imaginary greatness. His cold supporters look at what is happening with indifferent contempt, sharing with the master the confidence in their own superiority. A sinister intent clouds the eyes of the arrogant aristocrat, anticipating the coming reprisal against the unwanted upstarts. With one sharp snap of his fingers, he attracts everyone's attention, announcing the terms of the ultimatum. The plan is extremely simple. Whose team is the first to deal with the formidable boss of the impending catastrophe will receive the coveted right to command the rest. Like puppets of someone else's will, the arrogant nobles turn around and leave, leaving behind only a trail of insolence and impunity. Kazuki only sighs heavily, trying to reason with his comrades, but understands that diplomacy is powerless here. Reito and the rest of the squad are filled with righteous anger. They will not allow some upstart to push them around. Kazuki's cold, analytical mind instantly assesses the situation, estimating the enemy's combat power and developing a strategy for victory. Turning to his team, Kazuki calmly declares that it is time to teach the arrogant snobs a good lesson. Kusanagi Minato gestures for one of his opponents to come forward, reminding him that true strength is not measured by birth, but by will. The opponent blinks in confusion, but Kazuki is not going to waste time on empty ceremonies and urges him on with a sharp shout. Enraged by humiliation, the fighter rushes forward with a wild cry, unleashing all his pent-up rage in one crushing blow. Kusanagi Minato meets the attack with frightening calm, turning the tables at the last moment and delivering a crushing counterpunch straight to the opponent's jaw. 2 out, the enemy's blow is smashed against an invisible barrier, confirming the full power of the protective barrier. Kazuki explains the basic principles. A gigantic reserve of energy allows it to be used intuitively and without much thought. The latest attack only highlights the futility of physical brute force against an experienced mage. The students diligently remember the lesson. The main thing for any magician is to steadily increase their potential. Meanwhile, Raito rushes to his comrade's aid, channeling healing energy. Healing magic gently envelops the victims, restoring their strength after a grueling workout. In another sector of the training ground, Raito demonstrates his honed combat skills by manipulating streams of water magic. In the silence of his room, Kazuki reflects on the fact that, in addition to magic, reliable equipment is also necessary for survival. The refusal of experienced craftsmen to take on orders forces the guy to take everything into his own hands. Reflecting on the situation, Kazuki decides to rely on his own strength and ingenuity. Throwing back the lid of the cabinet, he begins searching among the old things. Fingers carefully pick up a modest ring with a tiny green stone. Having assessed the find, Kazuki understands that this is clearly not enough for the upcoming dangers. A phone call interrupts his thoughts, and Kazuki immediately answers the call. There is silence on the other end of the line, making the guy guess about his interlocutor's intentions. Having received unexpected confirmation of his thoughts, Kazuki immediately decides to act. Smiling, he remembers Raito and decides to take advantage of the moment and dial the number. Raito answers the call with surprise, asking for details of the upcoming shopping trip. Kazuki's short answer catches the girl off guard, causing her to quietly repeat what she heard. Before she could come to her senses, Kazuki was already there, confidently looking straight into the eyes of his confused friend. Kazuki calmly suggests meeting, as if there was nothing unusual about this phone call. She listens to his proposal in silence, feeling a strange excitement growing inside her. Kazuki's plan seems simple, but there's a subtle determination in his voice. She freezes in indecision, not knowing how to react to such an unexpected turn of events. Kazuki's sudden gesture draws all her attention to the small detail in his hands. The artifact flashes with a mystical light, filling the air with strange energy. At that moment, the door of the room quietly opens, breaking the silence. The confused sister peers inside, blinking sleepily. The door slides to the side, revealing a view of what is happening. A girl with long hair tries on outfits, and her sister freezes on the threshold in complete amazement. A mixture of shock and silent question can be seen on her face. In the reflection of the mirror, the girl looks collected and detached from the hustle and bustle. The sisters exchange glances, and the tension in the room becomes almost palpable. The sister is taken aback by the unexpected sight, trying to comprehend what is happening. Meanwhile, Kazuki has already arrived at the busy Harajuku station, waiting for the meeting. But he doesn't even suspect that he is being watched. His sister hides her aura, watching from afar. She mentally reproaches herself for this surveillance, but curiosity gets the better of her. Kazuki looks around, feeling a vague sense of unease. The girl's spectacular appearance makes passers-by freeze in admiration. She confidently approaches Kazuki, throwing out a cheeky question with a slight smile. Kazuki casually explains to his companion the purpose of their unexpected expedition. Meanwhile, a couple of ubiquitous observers freeze in surprise, not believing their eyes, and some people clutch their heads in despair, completely unable to understand how to react to such a shocking turn of events. Kazuki elaborates, though the very idea of what's happening seems a little surreal to both of them. The guy thoughtfully goes over the options in his head, realizing the scale of the task ahead. The girl looks around with interest, noticing the commotion around her. For a moment there is an awkward pause, full of comical confusion, but the very next second they are walking side by side again, trusting in the flow of the day. Soon their search leads the couple to street stalls and shops, where their eyes are dazzled by the selection. They carefully examine the display cases, immersed in the search for the thing they need. Kazuki demonstrates the discovered exhibit, while reminding us of the considerable value of such finds. However, the curious spy in the cafe continues to burn with impatience, trying to catch at least a word from their conversation. The saleswoman happily greets guests, smiling broadly and opening her arms. Kazuki waves his hand in confusion, trying to smooth over the sudden misunderstanding. But the companion immediately takes the initiative into her own hands, dismissing any false assumptions with icy calm. The poor saleswoman almost faints from surprise, showering everyone with apologies out of fear. The frightened woman quickly retreats, leaving the couple to deal with the consequences. Kazuki awkwardly combs his hair back, feeling slightly confused. The cozy atmosphere of the cafe brings welcome relief after a tiring walk. Sipping his drink through a straw, Kazuki becomes deeply immersed in thoughts about his future. Having grown his hair long and hiding his true emotions behind an indifference, Leto sits across from Kazuki, sipping his drink. There's an unexpected vulnerability in her voice as she admits to her lifelong inability to be soft and open with people. Kazuki listens attentively, realizing that this is only the protective armor of his interlocutor's complex character. At that very moment, Raito appears nearby, wearing a stylish hat, and his jealous gaze turns to their table. The blue-haired girl reflects bitterly on the fact that she always has to squeeze any words out of Raito. But Raito, feeling like an outsider in this company, suddenly decides that her presence here is inappropriate. Kazuki's eyes widen in surprise, not expecting to hear such harsh and self-critical words. Leto continues to be tormented by doubts, feeling guilty even about choosing simple jewelry for a guy. Meanwhile, Kazuki recalls a recent shopping trip filled with completely different intonations. Noticing the strange tension, Raito touches his own strand of hair with slight shyness and trepidation. Watching this scene from the sidelines, Raito, wearing a cap, feels growing irritation from his sister's strange behavior. She bites her lip in frustration, wondering what their once familiar life has become. Gathering her courage, she turns around abruptly, deciding to leave this strange dialogue behind. Meanwhile, Kazuki looks at the treasured boxes with rings with a beaming smile, delighted with his successful purchase. Raito looks at the scattering of acquired items with slight shock, not believing his eyes. Their gazes meet for a moment under the warm rays of the sunset, giving birth to an unspoken understanding. The girl sighs, noting how unusually seriously this frivolous guy approached such an important matter. Kazuki, showing off a heavy package, jokingly remarks that such equipment would be more suitable for real combat. Raito smiles faintly, remembering how easily and casually they spent that day. Saying goodbye on a street bathed in the setting sun, they thank each other for their help, leaving behind all their unspoken worries. The unexpected gesture makes the girl freeze, and her wide-open eyes reflect the shine of the golden medal. Kazuki hands her an elegant ring, leaving no room for objections or embarrassed refusals. One movement, and the cold metal gently rests on her finger, sealing their sudden pact. Raito watches the proceedings with his trademark mischievous smile, clearly pleased with the effect produced. The girl turns sharply, trying to hide the flame that has flared up on her cheeks, and says a hasty goodbye as she goes. Kazuki just blinks in confusion, realizing that he still hadn't managed to tell her the whole truth about the purpose of this artifact. She walks quickly down the busy street, trying to get as far away from the confusing guy as possible. Suddenly, she stops, frozen in the middle of the crowd, and looks at her own hand in disbelief. The rays of the setting sun snatch the precious stone from the semi-darkness, shimmering on her finger like a small reminder of what happened. The cheeks flush again, and the heart skips a beat under the surging wave of unexpected and sweet thrill.